And really, anyway, before we start, I'd just like to welcome everybody to the Ocean Suite, and also Mr. Davey, who's clearly done something wrong on the basis he's sitting there like nobby no mates up the front. So, but there we go. Anyway, if we could, you tell me when we're live, please, Felix. We're on? Okay, lovely. Good evening, and welcome to the meeting of East Devon District Council on the 7th of December 2022. I'm your chair, Councillor Ian Thomas. We're meeting here at Ocean in Exmouth following the decision at our last council meeting that council committees and subcommittees return to physical meetings unless current legislation permits us to hold meetings online. Our agenda is available in full at eastdevon.gov.uk, and we'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of members present. When you hear your name, could you please confirm your attendance by saying present? Over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armstrong. Yes, thank you. Yes. Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Bailey. Present. Councillor Barrow. Councillor Bickley. Councillor Blakey.
Present.
Councillor Bloxham.
Present.
Councillor Bonetta.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Bruce. Councillor Burrup. Might be late. Councillor Cagill.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Councillor Chubb.
Present.
Councillor Coleman. Councillor Desarum.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Dent.
Present.
Councillor Faithful.
Present.
Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gazzard.
Present.
All right. Councillor Hartnell.
Attentive apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor Haywood.
Present. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Ingham.
Present.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor Johns.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Okay. Councillor Ledger. Councillor Loudon.
Present.
Councillor Manley.
Present.
Councillor McCollum. Councillor Miller.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Moulding.
Present.
Councillor Parr.
Present.
Councillor Pepper.
Attentive apologies.
Councillor Rickson.
Present.
Councillor Rowland.
Present.
Councillor Rylance.
Present.
Councillor Skinner.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Councillor Wibley. Councillor Woodward.
Present.
Councillor Ragg.
Present.
Councillor Chris Wright.
Present.
Councillor Tom Wright.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Coleman. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can confirm we're quorate. Before we move into the meeting itself, I should really give you a quick run through the microphone system. It's not the same one as we use in Blackdown House, as you've obviously realised. To speak, there's a little button in the middle with an on-off button and a man speaking in a box or a person speaking in a box. When you want to speak, if you press that button, your light should go red. on the microphone, and that will indicate that you're on link to the PA. If when you've completed speaking, you could actually hit the button again to extinguish that little red light, that would be great. So when you're asked to speak, when you're called to speak, if you could press that button, it makes sure that we have a recording of the meeting, and obviously anybody watching us out in the wilds of YouTube can actually see what's going on. So anyway, I've got 3 members of the public now listed to speak. Just remind each speaker that you have 3 minutes to speak, and we will give you a 30-second reminder before the end of that 3-minute period. Firstly, I've got Mr. Ian Priestley. Is Mr. Priestley here? Thank you, Ian.
Good evening, Council. I'm Ian Priestley, Chair of the Colyford Residents Association. I'd like to talk on Item 9, Report C, the Colyford CGR. I would like to thank all involved in making the CGR happen. I would especially like to thank the Cabinet, its Chair, and Henry Gordon-Lennox for the incredible hard job they undertook last Monday. There was a mountain of complex paperwork to wade through, and we appreciate the time this would have taken. It was a thoroughly professional job. They had to cut through a range of emotional issues and arguments to recognise the facts and figures, and saw and hopefully believed in our vision for the future of Colyford. Democracy quite rightly has prevailed and overcome any personal or political feelings. Our village's precious farmland has been sold to developers over the years for housing, and we must accept everything that comes with that trade. It's not all about counting the money. There are always consequences, and changes were inevitable. Colyford has expanded very quickly over a relatively short period to over 800 people, making it the largest village in the area without its own parish council. Simply, we were allowed to get too big, and that alone warrants a dedicated council. When any settlement is expanded like this, for better or worse, the dynamics change. The status quo has been ripped up through development and made it difficult for Colleton to now manage us effectively. Colyford, providing we get the green light this evening, will need time to prepare to govern without hindrance, hampering or heckling in any way. We need to work together now in a professional manner and abide by this council's decision. The creation of a new parish council is now hopefully happening, and whilst I understand completely that not everyone is 100% happy with the final decision, it needs nonetheless to be accepted. We need to prepare and then serve the community without disruption or undermining or any more ill feeling. Colleton Parish Council will now have time to focus on greater detail for any adjustments and manage a less daunting size of a parish. Finally, I urge you to listen to the advice of your cabinets and trust their judgments. If you have been lobbied, please ignore the tittle-tattle and trust your cabinets. They've worked hard to get to their decision. If you haven't quite managed to wade through the mountain of paperwork, again, please trust your cabinets. You employ them for a reason. They've done the legwork for you and carefully considered all of the issues. The fate and welfare of Colyford and its 800 residents rests on tonight's decision. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Priestley. Second speaker I have this evening is Mr. Julian Thompson. Julian, over to you.
Good evening. Again, agenda item 9C. Thank you to Cabinet for CGR approval thus far, officers for the task in organising CGR, consultations and reports, and you, the Council, for opportunity to make a statement. Democracy is a way of governing which depends on the will of the people. And the key CGR issue is to restore democracy for Colyford with a new parish council, a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The current governance for Colyford has become systematically dysfunctional over time, is broken and cannot be fixed. Our community belief is that we have the skills, experience and competency to constitute and operate our own parish council. We also have the values and ambition. We are prepared and determined. Colyford has come of age and should be permitted, as its statutory right, to address pressing issues with our own funding. We wish to use our own identity, our heritage and our enthusiasm to deliver an effective and efficient parish council to restore democracy for our community. The challenge is affordable and can be delivered. The Colyford Village Residents Association, CVRA, was registered with East Devon and founded in 27 and is the de facto voice of our village. We have the provenance in that the CVRA successfully defended the green wedges twice at our expense. The CVRA delivered a petition supported by 249 people, 32% of the village, in July 21 to initiate the CGR process. And that we have adhered to for 12 months. Subsequently, the CGR result showed a strong majority for change. 76% of Colyford submissions wished to have their own council. Cabinet unanimously voted in principle for a new parish council, and importantly, you, the council, did not object. The proposed boundary makes sense based on the historic royal manor of Colyford, and we agreed the draft proposals for the parish council in August. We also identified some supplementary issues and proposed vesting statements that should form the supplementary package of work undertaken by the CEO.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Whatever your tribe, this vote should not be political. This is a vote to support the will of the Colyford people to restore democracy for an historic rural community of 800 that is one of the largest in East Devon without a council. Therefore, we seek council to restore democracy by confirming the Cabinet recommendation and resolve the remaining supplementary CGOs with delegation to the CDO. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Next, I've got Alison Stenning. Alison. Thank you.
Good evening. The 3 fields owned by Colyford Parish Council on New Sidmouth Road, north-east of Stafford Cross, which would be transferred by you to Colyford as a consequence of establishing the CVRA's proposed boundary, were created by Colyford Parish Council early in the 20th century, and a water supply was established to them, turning rough scrubland into something arable. The rent from those fields goes directly towards the maintenance costs of the cemetery. Colyford Parish will end up footing the bill for maintaining all the amenities in Colyford, and there are many amenities in Colyford, whilst residents of Colyford will still be able to enjoy them without contributing a single penny towards maintenance costs. In fact, Colyford will only have its small play parks, wings and gateways to maintain, so I really cannot see any reason for the transfer of these valuable assets to them. In a time of scarce resources when everyone is short of money and people cannot afford to heat their homes, I urge you to reject splitting our parish, as this will cost both the District Council and everyone living in the present parish of Colyford a great deal of money which they don't have. No one wants a huge hike in their council tax bills. Residents were not fully informed when the CGR questionnaire had to be filled in, thinking it was only a consultation and there would be a vote later when they had been fully informed about the effects of a split. This is dividing friends and neighbours, particularly in Colyford, strangely enough. Colyford Parish Council has 4 councillors from Colyford, and they could have up to 13 were they elected, and they are absolutely treated equally, as we have always been one parish, and Colyford has never been refused any reasonable requests. I urge you not to split our parish, and please don't railroad through this important matter to all the residents of Colyford Parish. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Alison. Thank you very much, all speakers. As you'll probably recognise, that the minute has been called and will obviously be discussed later on. Councillor Parr, is...
Yes, Chairman. I think there are a table of other speakers here, and they were registered by the clerk with Amanda earlier, and I've got an email from her saying that one is registered to read out a statement from the parish council.
Certainly, as it stands on my list here, Councillor Parr, there are no other speakers that are registered. Sorry, how many? Just to remind me again, how many speakers are we talking about that haven't, for whatever reason, made it onto this sheet? Two. I think under the circumstances and in the interests of ensuring everybody gets heard as well as is reasonably possible, I'm prepared to allow those two speakers. Again, 3 minutes, the same as the other, and I obviously can't explain why you haven't appeared on my list, but there we go. So forgive me, could I have your names, please?
Yes, Joy Gardner.
Joy Gardner, thank you, Joy.
Ken Clifford.
Ken Clifford. Joy, would you like to go first, please? You've
Yes,
got
thank
3 minutes, and you'll be reminded 30 seconds from the end.
Thank you. I'm reading a statement on behalf of the chairman of the Colleton Parish Council, who's not able to be here tonight. The Colyford Governance Review questionnaire has conflicting evidence in the replies. A lot of people commented against the split. 195 comments. 56 comments were in favour. Why were these comments ignored? And when Colleton Parish Council asked for a proper ballot to establish clearly what the residents wanted, why was this request refused? Proceeding on these grounds will result in the acrimonious split between the communities which have lived in harmony together for over 120 years. Colleton Parish Council will be left with all the financial responsibilities, 22 assets that have to be maintained. Colyford will have 2. Why order a transfer of assets, the 3 fields, when Colleton Parish Council needs the money, as they will lose £16,000 contribution from the Colyford residents to their precept? The fields are worth £140,000 with an annual rent of £3,600. There is no need to transfer them simply because they are located within the Colyford suggested parish boundary, and a new Colyford Parish Council could sell this land. Why has this Colleton-Colyford separation been treated so differently from the Ottery St Mary West Hill case? And as a resident of Colyford, I'd just like to say on my own behalf, at the time where financial constraints and fiscal responsibility is in the forefront of the minds of all councils, be it county, district or parish, it is not in the interest of Colleton or Colyford residents to split and form a second council. The result of the 2 councils will be an increase in the administration cost and potentially an increase in the council tax for all residents. The divisive action it will cause simply does not justify the end results. Processes, policies and procedures are already in place and are very effectively managed by the Colleton Parish Council. I understand this consultation was carried out in accordance with the Local Government and Public Health Act of 2007, and it states, in making that decision, principal councils need to take into account the views of local people. Please consider this obligation when making your decision tonight and what it would mean for Colleton and Colyford community as a whole. Please remember that it was actually less than 29% of Colyford's residents who showed an interest in forming a new Colyford Village Council. 29%. Many thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Joy. And next I've got Mr. Clifford. Ken.
Right, thank you. I'll be nice and brief. At the meeting in Honiton on Monday, an East Devon councillor explained that what is happening between Colleton and Colyford is a movement also elsewhere around the country. Right. Already in the parish of Colleton and the silent majority of Colyford, there are strong mutterings that we would be better off with our neighbours under West Dorset Council. Food for thought. Thank you.
Well, I think that's an extreme view, which I think would take my ward straight across the border as well, although you might not be on your own in wishing to see the back of that.
Glad you
anyway,
appreciate that.
So thank you very much, everybody, members of the public. And I've also now got an indication from the ward member who would like to speak in a personal capacity on the governance review, please. Councillor Arnott, Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope everybody can hear me. I would come down to the cheap seats, but the CEO said I can stay up here for this moment, so thank you. This is the first time I've spoken on this issue. I have had no conversations until last week after the last Cabinet with any officers on this throughout. But I don't think I can stay silent tonight given what I've heard. There's never a good time to speak from the heart, really, about this. I've been a Colleton Parish Councillor since 2007, and not to put too fine a point on it, I perfectly understand why the people of Colyford want to have their own democratic entity. In that time as a Colleton Parish Councillor, we have never had more than 2 women at the same time out of 13 councillors. A key role is played by landowners on that committee who also sit on the Colleton Chamber of Fees, where until last year there had never been a woman out of 15 of those. I have seen great hard-working representatives from the Colyford community being very poorly treated and disrespected at Colleton Parish Council. I think particularly of the late and brave Alan Davis, Derek House, Ray Woods, Eddie Jones and Howard West. In relation to the fields that seem to so vex some people here, they are only registered in the ownership of Colyton Parish Council because Howard West and I and Sheila Smith ensured that was regularised. You might wonder why that was. So now to the reality. Every single house in Colyton received a detailed consultation document from EDDC back in February. Many hundreds responded, better than the average turnout at many local elections. An element of the parish council has been telling anyone that will listen that they weren't consulted. Yes, they were. We all were in the community. It's just that the chair of the council and others were too indolent to respond and react. Now we are getting last-minute Trumpian objections. But meanwhile, before February and since, the Colyford Village Residents Association, which has been wickedly abused at Colyton Parish Council meetings, and indeed at Honiton at Cabinet last week, got on with a professional job. Councillor Andrew Parr, the chair of Colyton Parish, has repeatedly characterised some collusion between the CVRA and our senior legal officers, and he was obliged to withdraw that in public at Parish Council only the other day. The report before you tells the whole story. Full due process has been followed at every stage. At Cabinet on Monday, chaired by my deputy leader, Paul Hayward, I was absent as I will be in a moment, made a decision around the assets and the vesting, which went hugely in favour of the continuing Colyton Parish Council. I think 22-2 was what Councillor Gardner has just said. Those assets are worth a huge amount of money, and Colyford are prepared to walk away from that. So I say now to supporters such as Councillor Moulding and Councillor Parr who still wish to stop this, why pour petrol onto the coal ashes now? The answer is, of course, influence over future development of land held by Fearfee parish councillors, but that is a story for another day. Finally, I do not believe the parish councillors here present from Colyton do represent the views of Colyton at all. And only 2 weeks ago, in a last-ditch move to try and force a parish poll, which would have cost a great deal of money, the parish council by a majority voted against doing so. I believe that the matter is now settled within Colyton. I believe if you were at the Colyton Christmas market tonight, as I wish I was, frankly, nobody is talking about this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to all speakers. And as I said earlier on, this matter has been called by Councillor Parr and as such will be discussed again later in the meeting. And as you will probably be aware, the decision ability for this matter lies with this council. Councillor Skinner, you're indicating, is this something relevant to
Yes,
this?
I would like to, if I may, Chair, I would like to understand that from the Cabinet meeting that I went to last week, that Councillor Arnott declared an interest at that meeting and has subsequently declared interest before, that when we get to the 11th hour of coming to this meeting, that all of a sudden we have a tirade of his view when he declared an interest at the previous meetings. Could you be clear from the monitoring officer or the chief executive that what then gives him the ability to speak at this meeting on the basis that he declared interest at previous meetings? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the interest that was declared at the last meeting, assume it's the same interest that's declared tonight, does allow that member to speak in the public speaking section of the meeting, but then would have to absent themselves when the matter is discussed.
Thank you very much, Henry. And that was the basis, Councillor Skinner, that I accepted Councillor Arnott's piece this evening. Minutes of the previous meeting, agenda item 2. If anybody's got any comments on our minutes of our meeting on the 19th of October, would you please raise your hand? Councillor Armstrong. Megan.
Right, can you hear me?
Yeah, well, I can hear you, yes, and your red light's on, so I'm assuming the world can as well.
Good. I'm wanting to call a minute. Is this the appropriate time to do it?
Should have been done by 5 o'clock.
Well, in fairness to Megan, she did make that known early enough to suit. Yes. Yeah. No. Yes. Megan. Councillor Armstrong. Yes, it is appropriate to raise that now.
Thank you very much. Just bear with me because it's a couple of pages of notes, so just bear with me. I just want to start by saying that during the 7.5 years of my being a councillor, I can't remember ever calling a minute. But I felt on this occasion that it was so important that I needed to. So I would like to call minute 44, temporary continuation of virtual meetings, regarding recommendation 3 from the last council meeting held on the 19th of October. I have 3 reasons for calling this minute. Firstly, recommendation 3 stated that, quote, Council requires a report to December's meeting presenting a hybrid solution for members to consider, unquote. As far as I'm aware, this has not been done, and it is not on this evening's agenda. I find this totally unacceptable. Secondly, this omission has not been explained to members, therefore a complete lack of communication from officers, which again I find totally unacceptable. Thirdly, having listened again last night to the recording of that item at the 19th of October meeting, it was very clear that this vital issue had not been followed up as promptly as it should have been since May this year. Therefore, we as members are still oblivious to the current situation. There is no report for us to consider, causing even more delay, and no indication as to when the hybrid solution to our meetings will come into effect. The latter part of this item at the last meeting, emphasised by several people, including members and the senior officer present, that, and I'm quoting what you said, Chair, at that meeting as I listened to the recording last night, a comprehensive report comes forward for our December meeting without fail, then we can make an informed decision, unquote. So with the Chair's agreement, can there please be an explanation now by someone, either an officer or yourself, Chair, as to why this instruction from this council has not been carried out? Also, when will this report be received for members to consider, and by whom, considering the urgency of this matter? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, and obviously further to a discussion we've had earlier today, I can confirm that I'm going to make an announcement, a verbal announcement under item 6, which is messages from the Chair. And the fact of it is really the time for officer time hasn't made it possible to actually make the progress that I think we all hoped would be made by this stage. But if you would leave me to pick it up with under item 6, and by all means question me at that time if you wish, and then it will mean we can move on from this one. But you haven't been forgotten, and it will be commented on.
Chair, I'm hoping that other members will also question as well. Thank you.
I'm perfectly happy, as you know, to answer questions from anybody at any time, but perhaps not just this minute. Anyway, so as far as the minutes, I don't see any other hands shown. So as far as the minutes of the 19th of October, could I please see members vote in favour or against agreeing the minutes? If you could raise your hands in favour. That's clearly carried. So I can confirm that the minutes of Council on the 19th of October are agreed as a true record. Agenda item 3, apologies. I've so far received apologies from Councillor Mike Allen, Alistair Bruce. Councillor Alistair Bruce is apparently fighting a Citroen in a garage in Axminster at the last time we conversed. Councillor Burhop, although I did see a gentleman I didn't recognise move in, and welcome, Chris. You didn't manage it. We spotted you. I tell you, you must be the first person who's been clapped for placing your apologies on the record. Next, Councillor Sarah Chamberlain, who may be late, but register her apologies. Councillor Davey, who unfortunately is unwell. Councillor Hall, Councillor Howe, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Pook, Councillor Pratt, and I've also, although it's clearly not true, I had originally apologies from Councillor Rylance, the Deputy Chair, my Vice Chair, who is definitely here. Councillor Skinner.
Did you got down Councillor Pepper and Councillor Hartnell, please? Oh, and Councillor Twist, sorry, yes.
Hang on, Councillor Pepper, Councillor Hartnell, Councillor Twist. Sorry, did I get all of those, Councillor Skinner?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. And there was another. Councillor Kemp. Yes, I got Councillor Lawrence. I got Richard's apologies. Oh, and Councillor Young. Councillor Young as well. Have we got anybody left who's not apologised? I'll reserve judgment on that till I see what time we finish. And I don't have any apologies from Honorary Alderman. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. It gets better. Mindful of the new code and conduct, could members please state their declaration, including which agenda item the declaration relates to and exactly what the interest is and the specific type of interest you're declaring. Councillor Miller. Paul.
Cabinet, 2nd of November, LED member, and it is an effects non-registrable interest. I'm a member of LED.
Thank you very much. Very precise as always. Any other bids? Oh, Councillor Arnott. Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If we come to a discussion on the Colyford governance review, I'll need to leave because I have a registrable interest there as a parish councillor. Directly relates ORI.
Thank you very much. Councillor Woodward. Tony.
Thank you. I'm also an LED member.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Dent. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of LED and a member of the forum as well.
Can we be clear? Sorry, members. Can we be clear what we're actually declaring? What interest you're declaring?
Effectively, a personal interest.
Yes, but we don't have personal interest now, so...
Other than the fact I obviously pay a subscription, a membership subscription.
Well, Councillor Miller, you declared that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same for everybody. But if that's what they want to declare, then we just need to hear it. So for Councillors Woodward and Dent, then, it would be an effects NRI, is that right?
I believe it to be an NRI, yes.
Effects NRI.
Yes, Henry.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any more, thankfully. Matters of urgency, I have no matters that the officers recommend be dealt with urgently. On agenda item 6, announcements from the chair or leader. I have 2 announcements to make, first of which I'd already made, so we'll have an encore welcome to Councillor Chris Burhop, who was elected at the recent by-election in Newton, Poppleford and Hertford on the 10th of October to replace my previous vice chair, sadly, who's no longer with us. I sure would all like to wish him well and help him as he takes up his new council duties amongst us. Welcome, Chris. Secondly, to make my friend Councillor Armstrong happy, I would like to address the fact that we don't yet have a report as intended at this meeting about a hybrid solution for running future council committees and meetings in the council chamber at Blackdown House and Honiton. As Councillor Armstrong will remember, that was the intention. Unfortunately, time is making this process quite difficult. I received last evening a written report, which obviously I'm basing my comments on this evening. I don't propose to go through all of it other than to pick the important elements of it. And probably the most important elements from a personal point of view on this is that I've been present at 2 demonstrations from potential suppliers. The first potential supplier, sadly, was an extremely expensive and frankly not appropriate solution. Secondly, however, though we did meet with another potential supplier who has what I believe could be a perfectly good solution for us in council. Now, the reason I'm not asking for a report to be hurried forward, which obviously would have been difficult anyway, since this only came through last evening, is the fact that we don't have a cost of proposal from this particular supplier, and there are also 2 other potential suppliers in the wings as well. So it's not appropriate, I don't think, to go any further on that particular side of it here. But what we will be doing now is that following the presentations to officers, Strata and myself, and I think there was Councillor Loudon actually attended part of one of them. Officers are recommending that they have recommended a potential provider, but on the basis, as I've said earlier, I haven't seen a full proposal. I'm not intending to relay that to you this evening. But what I actually want to do is that it's important that whatever solution we do bring forward, particularly with IT systems, as experience gained previously, is that it has the confidence of all member colleagues and officer colleagues. So frankly, I'm working on the basis that I don't believe enough people have experienced the system the most promising system I've seen so far. So what I would intend to do is actually arranging, as soon as is reasonably possible, representative groups of members to come in and see the system in action and comment on it before we actually take it any further. And I think the same will apply to officers. It's very important that it's an important core element of how we do our business, that it's something that we're all confident in, and I hope you will bear with me on that particular aspect. There is another comment I'd like to make, though, in relation to what we're working tonight. What we're working tonight, as you remember, when I was concerned at the loss of the virtual meetings before, was as much as a requirement to have a matter of record of all the meetings that we actually do, who said what, and what actually happened. Now, that was something that we're in real danger of actually losing, but you'll note, I suggested, and we managed to secure very simple 2 camera systems and a PA as we're operating this evening, under the grateful for the gaze of Felix in the corner, who's making sure it all happens. Now, in terms of objectives, first was the objective of making sure everything's recorded and seen. We're satisfying that objective. There is a record that the public can view us live, warts and all. That objective's been satisfied as we are at the moment. The only thing that we're not satisfying is the ability of members to take part in meetings remotely. Now, there are 2 important things there, of course, that the 1972 Local Government Act still applies. That's the first point. Nothing's changed there. So what it would mean that any involvement by members remotely would only be on a contribution basis anyway. They wouldn't be able to vote. And any members within committees still would not be able to vote if they were accessing remotely. So that's important. So we're not actually losing as much as some members, our colleagues, I believe, think. I say, but that doesn't get away from the fact that it's important we are prepared for when our friend Mr. Rees-Mogg and his crew, he's not actually doing it now, is he? But actually look to modernise the 1972 Act, which, as all of us know, was actually came into the statute books 17 years before the internet was even invented. So it's not unreasonable to see that will be modernised in due course, and that by having a hybrid system, we'll place ourselves in a position to take part, to actually move forward, familiar with the systems as members. And I think that's something, again, as I mentioned earlier, is important. As I said, I don't propose to take it any further this evening, if members will bear with that, but just don't forget that for a second, or don't think for a second that I've forgotten it. And obviously I want to see more members involved in bringing this forward. And I've obviously 2 questions, and Councillor Armstrong's not smiling, so she clearly isn't happy. Not smiling. Okay. Councillor Armstrong, Megan, how can we answer a question for you?
Well, I understand you're probably in a difficult position because you're trying to calm me down, you're trying to calm other members down, and you've got officers on the other side. What concerns me is this is a matter of principle. It's a matter of principle of real vital importance for this council. This council gave instructions to officers at the last meeting, and those instructions have not been carried out. I understand if there have been some delays, perhaps members would have understood and been more sympathetic, including myself, had we had an email or some kind of communication to say why there'd been some delay. We've had nothing. We've had nothing until I saw the agenda whenever it came out, and I couldn't believe it. The report that had been gone on and on and on and on about at the last meeting, about how vital it was that it comes to this meeting, was not there. Now, people may not think that's important, but I do. I do think that's important. Officers have not done what they were asked to do, and it's worrying. I find that very worrying. And it could set a principle of that happening again. So could you give us any idea whatsoever as to when this is likely to happen? And who is actually leading on this? From the minute the recording I heard again last night from the October meeting, the monitoring officer said that it may not be his team that carried this out, but he would be supervising it. He would be sort of in charge of it. So I'd just like to know what's happening. Who's actually doing this work? Is it you as the chair? Is it the monitoring officer? Is it somebody else that's doing it? I'm sorry to delay things for members, but I think we just need some clarity on this. We need to know what's going on, who's doing it, and when is it likely to be sorted?
Okay, first point, if I'm trying to pick up all of them, this is very much like everything of these sort of thing. It's an officer-led project, not a member one. I'm assisting at the request to enable members to make this actually happen as soon as is possible, using expertise that perhaps is not widely available through our officers. Similarly, in terms of timing, the demonstrations I'm looking to see will be arranged certainly in early January 2023, and that to be a full-blown system for us to be able to test. And the last thing, frankly, Councillor Armstrong, and I make no apologies for this, I would wish to do, is if we're just to go in half-cock into the use of a new system. Because the worst thing that can happen is members and or officers lose confidence in a new system, and as a consequence of that, it comes into bad disrepute. Henry, you were going to comment.
Thank you. So members will appreciate that obviously the whole virtual meeting scenario effectively has been led out by me from an officer side in terms of reporting to council, the temporary regulations and so on and so forth. So it's kind of sat within my remit essentially. However, this has moved on to another officer group in terms of delivering a solution, because it's partly wrapped up in another project as well, although that's now been split again in light of the members' wish to get this sorted as quickly as possible. It's been split out again. But it had moved into a different team, into the comms team. That's where it's being led from. When I was talking at effectively being responsible for it in the sense that I was likely to be bringing the reports back to council, but I'm not the one who's actually driving it from the officer side, if you like. That's being led by another team. It's fair to reflect that we've been met with delays. I take the point about we could have sent an email out, but actually the chair had agreed that he would do it by way of update. But I appreciate that's not forewarning. Okay, I'm apologising for it, Councillor Armstrong. I'm not sure what I can say really. But we've been met with delays because we had to get suppliers in to be able to demonstrate, and it's just taken more time. And perhaps I was overly ambitious by saying that we'd bring a report back to December, but I was also conscious on the night that you were very keen to try and get a solution, so perhaps it was more hope than reality, and I can only apologise for that. But it isn't going to be my project, obviously, for obvious reasons, and as to timescales, I would hope early in the new year we will be able to say categorically when the report will come, because of course the next council meeting is February's budget setting meeting, and it's less than ideal that you would be wanting to have the report on virtual meetings to that, but that's not to say that you don't necessarily have an urgent meeting to consider that specifically. So I can't give you a definitive date yet, not least because we haven't got a definitive date for the presentation that the chair was talking about.
Thank you very much, Henry. Councillor Bailey, Jess.
Thank you. Yes, Chair, I do slightly disagree with what you say when you say we're not losing as much as some of my colleagues think, because I think we are losing quite a lot, because members of the public want to be able to participate remotely, and they're not able to. And I just want to also pick up on one other point. And if you look at the way the voting went on virtual meetings, the overwhelming majority of women councillors wanted to be able to continue with remote meetings. So it's particularly important for women councillors to be able to participate on a hybrid basis. And I'm really disappointed that there's no definite date. And I hope that, you know, maybe I'm not expecting one tonight, but I really hope that in the next day or coming days, you can give us a concrete date so that members can participate remotely if they're not able to come to a meeting, and actually voting isn't always relevant, and there are members of the public, particularly during the whole local plan process. You know, lots of people participate remotely, so please, can this be addressed urgently? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't disagree with all the things you were saying, but the fact of the matter is we were in a position where the ability to actually operate with virtual meetings, council made the decision not to progress it. And in that respect, I think we've made enormous, actually very swift strides in having within a few minutes of work and discussion with officers a system like tonight in place that does cover probably a good 80% of the requirements. Now, we're looking at, we know it's always easy to look and be critical of the failure percentage, but in this respect, I think we're actually still right at the front, the vanguard of councils who do broadcast everything publicly that we're doing now, and we should actually take a little bit of credit for that rather than necessarily being criticised. But as I say, I absolutely understand all the issues, and in fact, if you work back through many of the councils, you find I've voiced them myself previously. But I note your concern, and certainly there's no wish on my part to do anything other than support and encourage our officers in moving forward to a potential hybrid solution that's as flexible as the law allows as soon as possible. I don't actually have any more questions, although it's going to be a long night if we don't watch it. But that said, I am in debt to my colleague Councillor Skinner for reminding me of the passing of a former colleague at East Devon District Council who was actually before my time, so I know many of us won't actually be familiar with the lady, a lady called Elizabeth Hart, former councillor. She passed away on the 2nd of November, aged 86. And the funeral will be on Wednesday, the 14th of December at 10:45 a.m. At East Devon Crematorium. So it's literally just to note that and sympathies with former Councillor Hart and her family. Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Chair. I do try normally not to have any announcements from the leader, but I do tonight, but I think it will be one you're interested in, all of you, and I'll try and keep it snappy. First of all, good evening, members and officers, season's greetings to all of you. This freezing night in beautiful Exmouth by the sea. You will recall that a fortnight ago I wrote to our two MPs seeking their support for an amendment to the government's Levelling Up Bill concerning planning. Members will now be aware that the Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Michael Gove MP, made a speech yesterday which seems to have the effect of heading off that amendment at the pass. In particular, we are told that he will legislate in potentially welcome terms. I want to briefly discuss this today, what implications it could have for East Devon District Council. Firstly, he says that where a council has a local plan in place or is in the advanced stages of a new local plan, the requirement to constantly prove a 5-year land supply will be lifted. This might seem like promising news, but as ever, the devil is in the detail. I would argue that we do have a local plan fit till 2030 and are well progressed with the local plan till 2040. But we will need to see what the government's small print is as to how this transition period may be interpreted. So some cause for hope, but well short of optimism at the moment. Secondly, he says that confirmed neighbourhood plans will now have status for 5 years, not the mere 2 years, which has been stated by 4. And I'm sure many communities and many members will welcome this after all their hard work. Although, of course, the MPPPF still stands atop the hierarchy, so let's see what actual protection that will afford. Thirdly, it is said that the 20% extra contingency amount, or buffer, built into housing numbers will no longer need to be adhered to. If this was the case, and with no other factors, our identified target of 940 homes per year would greatly decrease overnight. But again, is this what he really means, and what will he actually legislate for? Or is he just spiking the guns of backbench rebels before Christmas? Fourthly, and of huge significance, he seems to be saying that the housing number itself will no longer be sacrosanct. Now, lots of people are becoming excited by this. Oh good, they are saying, at our local plan consultations, so you don't need the 940 after all. But yet again, members, I would urge you, let's see the detail in the white paper. So I'd like to conclude briefly with 2 thoughts arising. As it happens, I believe the majority of members agree it is a very good thing that the people of East Devon are being consulted at the moment in a hitherto unsurpassed transparent process for this council on the draft local plan. We need that feedback even more now than ever. We need to take the brickbats and the arguments for and against. That is democracy. As I've done publicly on many occasions now, I urge people to respond. I was told by officers today that we have over 1,000 responses so far. These are coming in through the Commonplace portal, letters, emails and slips deposited at the many consultation events run by our officers, who I would like to thank. They are likely to still come flooding in. Good, that is democracy. Put your best foot forward. Consult, digest, react, consult again, and again if we have to. That is what this process has always been about. The second and final thought is that once we have all this information back and we are clear what the legislation from government is, and not just the early kite flying from the Secretary of State, this administration will make sure that we do all we can early in the new year to take advantage of these potential changes in the interests of the people and environment of East Devon. But the watchword for now is proceed with caution, but hope to plan for the positive next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Faithful. Peter, you wanted to...
Thank you, Chair. Following up on the comments by the leader, I was at the meeting for parish councils, the online meeting with parish councils with Ed Freeman, and one of the parishes commented that they, on the smiley faces circles, they suggested they put in their negative comments, I don't know if it should say the parish, but and they checked online, and they said that all the response that was online was 100%, was all the 100%, the smile 100% rather than the zero support for. So it's all the smileys when they put all the opposite end. Ed Freeman said he would look into it, but if this is what was happening online on this thing, will that make the whole consultation null and void because it's recording all the wrong information? I'm also concerned about the way the smiley faces go left to right, so your miserable face on the left and the smiley face on the right, but the rest of the circles below go the opposite. So the number one, the greatest in support, is on the left. And if you're partially sighted and the writing is very small, you can get misled by the smiley faces and put your circles in the wrong places. So I'm very concerned about that. Anyway, Chair.
Okay, I understand that, and obviously I'm not in a position to comment on it. Chief Executive, you anything? Yeah, I think Chief Executive's just, he hasn't actually got a microphone there, but as assured us that he'll take a look at that because it does sound unusual. And we won't wait until the next council meeting to report back to you. I think we'll pick up with Mr. Freeman and see what's happened. Councillor Johns, Vicky.
Hi. Yeah, my question is, the leader said just now that East Devon District Council officers are going around to the local villages and towns, etc., and doing basically a roadshow, a consultation was the phrase that was used, and yet the members of the public that I've spoken to, both at Sidmouth and at Ottery, have turned around and said it's not a consultation because the officers aren't answering any questions. It's their words, not mine, is they're going in and just being shown what is basically in front of them, but any questions or queries they've had are not being answered. Now, to my mind, a consultation, they would be answering the questions and queries, whereas this is more a roadshow as opposed to a consultation. I don't think it's actually advertised as a consultation either, is it? I think it's advertised more as a show and tell, for want of a better phrase.
I guess it's teacher days again, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so to my mind, it isn't really a consultation. So if you've got people that don't use the online stuff, and we know that there's thousands of pages on it, you know, people are getting a little bit confused. And when they're going along to ask the officers the questions, and I'm not blaming the officers that are there, because it's not a job that I would want. You've got lots of angry people going and asking lots of questions about things, but the questions aren't being answered there and then. So I don't see it as a consultation when they're doing the roadshows.
Oh, it's a fair comment in terms of degrees of engagement. Chief Executive, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, the officers are there fundamentally to facilitate understanding and to encourage representations to be made either through in writing or otherwise on the consultation software. So they're not there per se to answer everyone's query or question about the contents of the local plan. They're there to explain what's in it, and if people have got their concerns or their queries, put your consultation in, and then we can consider it, and it will be reported in due course through to the Strategic Planning Committee. That's the purpose.
Thank you very much. I think your comments are noted, and I would imagine all good consultation processes will always have a review phase anyway, and improve in the future if there's a shortfall in this. Councillor Miller, Paul.
Can I raise a point of order to bring the Colyford governance review item forward? I think these residents have been waiting very, very patiently, and whilst these discussions have been very, very interesting, I think it would be appropriate to bring that item forward as soon as possible so they can travel back to Collerton this evening, if possible. Thank you.
Noted. I think I don't propose to do that, Councillor Miller, because we're almost there anyway, and I'm sure there won't be any supplementary questions. So you'll be able to help the process move swiftly towards conclusion. Right, that finishes item 6, which is probably the longest item 6 I can remember. Item 7, confidential exempt items. No items have been recommended by officers to be dealt with as confidential or exempt. Agenda item 8, to answer questions asked by members of the Council pursuant to rules 9.2 and 9.5. We've had 3 questions. From Councillor Miller, in the context of your earlier comment, do you wish to put a supplementary in?
No.
Good decision. Councillor de Sarum, Bruce, do
Yes,
you wish
just very quickly. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Young for his helpful response. I recognise, as we all do, that this is a very sensitive issue, and my brief supplementary question is, can we look to do further benchmarking in 2023 or 2024, as I believe it's a cost which the Council needs to keep its eye on, especially as we have around 1,000 memorial benches in the district, as you say, to my question. Thank you very much, Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you. Councillor Young. Is Councillor Young, I thought I saw him a second ago, is hiding with Councillor Burhop in the late arrivals corner. Councillor Young, would you like to answer that supplementary, please?
I've just got back from London and I haven't even seen my emails today, so I don't know what I commented yet.
So the answer is yes, if it helps, Councillor de Sarum. That's part of the regular process of reviewing charges and things.
Oh, thank you very much for that one. We're moving that along. Councillor Bailey, Jess.
Yes, I do have one supplementary. I asked the leader whether he'd had any responses to his email to Richard Ford MP and Simon Jupp MP in respect of the Theresa Villiers amendment. Obviously, that's moved on. I note that you did have a response from Mr. Ford, but not from Mr. Jupp. And I just wondered, obviously this answer was written a few days ago. Things have moved on with Michael Gove's statement. Have you heard anything from Simon Jupp?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Yes, I was grateful to Richard Ford for an instant reply. I've got a feeling that I haven't yet received anything from Mr. Jupp. I suspect his answer may be in my Christmas card.
Well, I'll tell you what, how do you follow that? Carefully, I would think. Agenda item 9, reports from Cabinet and Council's committees and questions on those reports. I'd like to receive minutes of the following committees and invite members to vote in favour or against agreeing those minutes. For members' information, recommendations are summarised on pages 26 of your hymn sheet reports. And sorry, Henry. Henry Gordon-Lennox will advise me of any call minutes when after each set of minutes is presented. First one I've got is Leader, minutes of Cabinet held on the 2nd of November 22nd. Please, Leader.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to present them to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite members to vote in favour or against agreeing those minutes accurate? Ooh. Pause 4, please. Any against? No, comfortably carried. Thank you very much. Next, I can confirm those minutes are agreed as a true record. Leader again, minutes of Cabinet held on the 30th of November 22nd. And I guess Councillor Hayward on the extraordinary Cabinet meeting on the 5th of December.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll present the ones for the 30th of November and then I'll leave the meeting, having previously declared an interest in relation to what we called minute for the 5th of December. So if I can just now present the minutes for the 30th of November 2022, please.
Chair, you've got two councillors calling the same minute, Councillor Miller and Councillor de Sarum both want to call minute 110.
Right, okay. Firstly, Councillor de Sarum, would you like to speak on that, please?
Thank you very much for your indulgence, Chair. At the outset of this call-in, I should mention that I have no issue at all about the need to provide housing within Exmouth. However, I believe that the Cabinet should have chosen option B, retain the site as a free car park, until we know precisely what is going to happen to the toilets served by the car park. As if the toilets are brought back into some form of use, such as a cafe, as the Mayor has suggested in Cabinet, then the car park itself will be of use to those who use the cafe. That is why I believe this decision needs to be further looked at. Furthermore, if the car park is built on, then there'll definitely be a loss of car parking spaces for the nearby residents of the flats and the local shoppers who may currently use this car park. It will also affect the outcome in respect of uses that can be put for the future use of the toilets in one of the poorer wards of the district. I've also had feedback that Tara, the Residents Association, is not happy with the decision of Cabinet. Therefore, for the reasons which I've just mentioned, I would most respectfully ask the Cabinet to think again and go for perhaps option B if there's still time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dessar. And we're under advice. I understand that this is actually a Cabinet decision, which in that respect, there's no scope for a vote to amend it. But I would imagine that obviously the portfolio holder will note your comments, but it isn't possible to have a vote to have that amended here because it is within the remit of Cabinet to make that decision, which Cabinet has actually done. Councillor Miller.
Well, sorry, chaps, for this. I'd hoped to bring Colin forward.
Sorry, do you want to move
on?
on?
I'm calling this minute, and it's about Councillor Loudon and Cabinet's vote on this. I actually agree with social housing in Litlam, in Jarvis Close car park, but I don't understand why Cabinet didn't vote for option B when it came to Sidbury free car park. You know, Councillor Ledger put it out there. He said, you know, you can have Z-pods there, and Councillor Loudon said, pretty much, point made, we're going to vote for a free car park. We need social housing everywhere across the district, not just in Exmouth. And I think that was the wrong decision. And I can't change that decision tonight because it's a Cabinet decision. But I would ask Councillor Loudon and the Cabinet to look again at all the free car parks across the district and you know, spread social housing everywhere. We need social housing for young people and for working age families to afford. You know, and our car parks are one of the best assets we can use for that. So I call politely and respectfully this evening for Councillor Loudon and Cabinet to bring that decision back. We've not called it in as a scrutiny call-in because it's not valid for a call-in, but I just ask you to bring it back, through you, Chair, bring it back and reconsider that decision. Thank you.
I mean, just briefly give Councillor Loudon the chance to comment should he so wish. There you go.
Right. Well, I'm not the portfolio holder, so I don't think that's my decision. I am the ward member, and I beg your pardon?
And the Cabinet member you voted.
I stand by...
Through the chair, please.
I stand by the comments I made at Cabinet, which were, and I am the ward member for Sidbury. I believe the comments I made were accurate, truthful, and to the point, and I stand by them, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other comment on that. So if the leader could please move, or you've moved your minutes. Did you move the minutes?
I did, Chair, yes.
It's catching up with me. It's these late nights in the cold. On that basis, then, could we vote, please, on the minutes of the Cabinet meeting of the November 30th only, please? All those in favour of accepting them as an accurate record? Any against? Well, no, it's comfortably carried. We now move on to the extraordinary meeting of Cabinet on the 5th of December. And Councillor Hayward, if you could, as Councillor Arnott beats a hasty retreat, could Councillor Hayward please present those minutes?
Crikey. May I present the minutes of the Cabinet held on, I suppose actually the only reference here, the minutes as per agenda item 9C, just for the point of clarity, they do refer to a consultative meeting of Cabinet. It's a physical meeting of Cabinet, isn't it? I think
That's correct. It was
just a semantic term.
No, it's perfectly correct.
So minutes of the Cabinet meeting held at the Council Chamber, Blackdown House, Honiton, 5th of December 2022, items 111 through to 115. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gordon-Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. So there is one correction. The eagle-eyed Chair of Audit and Governance has noticed that there's a superfluous K in the final bullet point and is unnecessary. So if members are or do approve the recommendation if you can note that it's a budget of 12,350 plus VAT. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one called minute on this, which is minute 115. Councillor Parr. Helen.
Thank you. And first of all, I just want to place on record my objection to Councillor Arnott's remarks earlier. I think it was most disrespectful of Colyford Parish Council, and he was casting a slur on councillors and landowners. I thought it was insulting and in very poor taste, and I'm afraid maybe a reflection of his character. Turning to this matter of the Colyford governance review, I simply cannot support the recommendations. I'm very grateful to the Cabinet for having an extra meeting so that councillors could read their paperwork because it was a late item. But that is what's happening this evening. Again, it's been lately added to the minutes and the agenda in effect. This came to me, this revised council agenda, at 20:01 yesterday as a late item added. How many members here have fully read and understood this matter? And it came as a rush to residents as well, extremely short notice for people to ask to speak, and as you say, they weren't listed. But thank you for having them to speak. Very difficult to get people organised. We've all got our other arrangements, as Councillor Arnott said. We've got our switching on of lights tonight and our Christmas market in Colyford, so people wanted to be there. Anyway, this is a very important decision, and it will affect residents directly financially through the council tax. When we were first asked about this, we received a questionnaire. It wasn't a voting paper or a ballot paper, it was a questionnaire. This is it. And people from West Hill will have seen it because that is what they received as well. But it nowhere says that if you give your views, this is your vote in effect. There was no information re the effect of the split. The information only became public at the Cabinet on the 13th of July as to what was planned by the Colyford Residents Association when there was an annex to that report. And you may have noted if you did manage to read those minutes, it was marked confidential. The contents of all this were not made public. The meetings of the Colyford Residents Association are all closed meetings. Unless you're a member, you cannot go to those meetings. You have to ask permission, and very much often it's refused. So this brings me to a point about democracy, which keeps being mentioned. I mean, is it democratic to not put out information and then require people to answer a questionnaire and tick yes, no about having a split of the parish? Is it democratic to ask people their views without any information and then rely on a tick box answer? And actually, there was recently a by-election in Colyford for 3 new parish councillors when there was every chance for the Residents Association people to be elected. And if, in fact, I think one of their members was, but not others that stood. The one who scored highest for Colyford was nothing to do with the CVRA, and he was democratically elected to Colyford Parish Council, as we all are, well, not me, because I'm not a member, but as all councillors on the parish council are. And he actually does represent people in Colyford. So I think it's extremely disrespectful for people to say that they are not being represented from Colyford and that they want to restore democracy. I think it's highly ironic. They've got 4 councillors on Colyford Parish Council, and I'd like to know when reasonable requests from Colyford have been refused. They've had everything that they've actually requested that's been reasonable. As I said, people were asked to give their opinion blind. It was more or less, what do you think about it? We're not going to give you any information as to what the effect will be. And of course, the effects are financial. Residents' council tax is going to be affected, and the precept for Colyford Parish Council will be £16,000 less, though the assets they have to maintain will stay the same. So when neighbourhood plans are introduced, as you know, the parishes will have a vote, and they did so in Collerton. And people, after this became known that it was being proposed to divide the parish, people said to me, well, when are we having the vote? Many people have spoken to councillors and said, parish councillors, and said, well, when are we having the vote? It's been recommended also in the vesting statement that the request for these 3 fields should be accepted. But again, these 3 fields and the income from them, they're worth £150,000. And at first, the CVRA asked for a proportion of them, which might have been reasonable because the parish council might have offered money instead. But anyway, the income from these fields is £3,000. So that brings us up to almost £20,000 lost to the budget of Colyford Parish Council and in effect to our residents in one hit. It's extremely unreasonable. I'm quite clear that this council have followed the procedures correctly, but I'm absolutely convinced that the process is undemocratic. It is not good governance to make people, in effect, vote without telling them they are voting, and then use the information to make decisions and not give them a result and not give them a vote when you are proposing something that is very important for this ward. It has been done properly, but is it just? Is it fair and reasonable to make a decision like this on tick box numbers when you haven't told people they're voting and you give them no information? I think this decision will be based on very low response numbers, and I think it will be very risky for this council. The parish council requested, because the paperwork wasn't the results weren't categorical, they requested a poll, and they would have funded it to find out exactly what residents' wishes were. I'm clear people didn't realise this questionnaire was their only vote, and they're not happy that the district council may split the parish. I don't think it's good governance, and I will not support this recommendation, and I would ask the council not to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parr. Before we take any more speakers, I think it's worth pointing out just what our options are tonight, which are essentially twofold. Firstly, that we receive a proposed, bear in mind this is a recommendation coming from Cabinet to full Council, that one option is that an amendment to that recommendation is proposed and considered in terms of a voting outcome, or alternatively, in the absence of an amendment, the only option we actually have in practice is to take the recommendation as it is, as presented, and it either stands or falls. So perhaps when colleagues are looking to make comment, if they could actually, if they're intending to bring forward an amendment, if they could highlight specifically what that amendment might be, and if they're not, that they're looking for a reversal or the alternative output, which I believe was not to progress with anything. Was that correct?
That was the alternative.
Yeah, that was the alternative presented from the meeting. Then we could take it that way. I've got next. I got Councillor Faithful, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. One of the members of the public commented that what Colyford had was not the same as the West Hill Ottery whatever questionnaire, consultation, vote, whatever it was. Could we have clarification if there was a difference and what the difference was?
Sorry, I'm not in a position to do that, but Chief Executive, could you comment, or Henry?
So I haven't done a side-by-side comparison, but my understanding is that they are very, very similar. The questions posed are very, very similar, and the way it was presented is very similar. Obviously, in a sort of slightly more digital age, it's slightly different, but generally speaking, they're pretty much the same, as I understand it.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Councillor Johns. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, there was questions earlier about why Councillor Arnott was commenting on this in his personal capacity, and he's now left the room, obviously, because of the fact that he lives where he lives. But there's another councillor who's just made loads of comments, etc., who surely has the same issue as they live within that ward. And so, no, but she lives within that ward. So if we're talking about raising the council tax, etc., but the most important thing I wanted to say is we had a similar thing with Ottery and West Hill. The majority of residents in Ottery did not want West Hill to separate from Ottery. It was a large parish, and it was covered by one council, etc. But we went out to a democratic, went out and asked everybody what, hoping that's not Councillor Arnott throwing himself around outside.
I wondered who would be the first to say that.
Yeah, so, we went out to, asked everybody their opinion, etc. And, we had to abide by what the majority wanted. So surely Colyford and Collerton have got the same issue. We had exactly the same at Ottery and West Hill. Ottery has the majority of things that we pay for out of the press set. And when West Hill left, they took a big chunk of money with them. I'm sure that the West Hill councillor will say the same thing. So yeah, exactly. But the thing is you get over that. You learn to live with it. You deal with it. The whole point of democracy is that everybody gets their say. And if they turn around and say, if the majority turn around and say they want to split, who are we as the council to tell them they can't? Surely that's the whole point of democracy. That's why everybody has a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Councillor Moulding. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I've lived in Musbury, as you are aware, for nearly 30 years, and that's an adjoining parish to Collerton, and I went to school in Collerton, so I have a great affinity with the area and with Collerton and the activities that it carries out. My belief is that Collerton and Colyford are much stronger together. Many letters against the idea have been put forward. I do not believe anybody wants to create a division between Collerton and Colyford. There has been claims that underinvestment in Colyford has led to this decision being brought forward. My submission is that nothing has been done by Collerton Parish Council to underinvest Colyford. In fact, I think what they're talking about in the questionnaire is investment in the A3052, and that, of course, is a Devon County Council matter and nothing whatsoever to do with Collerton Parish Council. I think this submission would see assets of the Parish Council, which have been maintained by the parish council being grabbed by the residents of Colyford who are in favour of this situation. The boundaries suggested seem to me to be wrong, and there is no historical reason why these pieces of land could be stolen by the unelected representatives. Parish council seems to me to be against it, and the difference, as I see it, between previous situations, as I mentioned at the cabinet meeting, when All Saints and Chardstock decided to split and become separate, it was by the full agreement of that parish council that operated as a joint council. I'm not sure about West Hill and Ottery, but I can imagine and assume that the parish council was in favour of the separation. Imagine what it would be like, Mr. Chairman, Chair, if Millway Rise had a group of Millway Rise residents who said they wanted to break away from Axminster, and they would want to perhaps include in their area the industrial estate of Millway Rise, which would be of great value. And even if the Axminster Parish Council was against the idea, in this instance we're seeing today, that would be brought forward as a submission that could be carried on with. If Axminster Parish Council disagreed with the idea, as long as an unelected group was able to put forward a submission, write a questionnaire, which is given to the residents, and say to the residents, what do you think? Millway Rise would have its own area to look after. It would have the industrial estate within part of its assets. I mean, that would be just wrong. This should never happen. One speaker suggested that the unelected group wishes to restore democracy. That was mentioned today. Surely democracy rests with the views of the people of Colleton and Colyford by a proper ballot for every resident of Colleton to be properly given the detail of what is proposed. So my amendment to this item would be not to progress with the idea of separation until a full ballot of Colleton Parish Council residents has been conducted and that they have been provided with all the full information, including financial information.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. I'm advised on that one, actually, that isn't a possible amendment. The reason I say that is it, in effect, it brings the whole process down in that there's a time-limited requirement to actually progress. Councillor, if the monitoring officer, if you'd allow clarification from the monitoring officer on that one.
Yep, so from... we have 12 months from the publication of the terms of reference to conclude the review, which it is concluded when the recommendations are published. So that would effectively have to happen after tonight's meeting. So if we go to a ballot, we'll be outside the 12 months.
So my amendment then would be not to progress with this suggestion.
Yeah, so that effectively is not to progress the recommendation still, isn't it? So we don't. It doesn't. You needn't put that, but I recognise that one. Thank you very much for that. I'm jumping around the orders a little bit with your indulgence and ask Councillor Hayward. Paul, if you could.
Thank you, Chair. I should, of course, now it's been mentioned, declare my interest as the clerk to Axminster Parish Council, but I need to clarify, I'm not speaking in any way in capacity as on their behalf, but simply because they've been mentioned by Councillor Moulding. My point really is this is about democracy, and every member of the Colleton and Colyford community had the opportunity to respond. As I mentioned at the last cabinet meeting, I checked the agendas for Colleton Parish Council. I think it was October and previous to that, and that council chose not to table a specific amendment or a specific motion to discuss this, that parish council could have, through its chair and its members, have highlighted this thing if they felt it was unfair. They could have marshalled another questionnaire. They could have done an awful lot of things, but they didn't. And that's entirely down to them. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they didn't choose to. And so what has been done, and Mr. Gordon-Lennox kindly on the meeting on Monday confirmed that this has been done entirely in accordance with the procedures and the legislation and good practice for community governance review. So it's been done in a fair and equitable way, and it ticks all the boxes. So it doesn't fall, it's not undemocratic, it's been done how we're instructed as a district council and how Mr. Gordon-Lennox and Mr. Williams are required to carry out community governance reviews. It's been done in accordance with that. Members in this room across the entire district will know that some issues generate an awful lot of community response. Others, such as elections that we've all fought, are often fought on an apathetic basis. We cannot force members of the public to be involved. And what I find dispiriting, personally, is the vitriolic enmity between neighbours and parish councillors who actually are only there to serve the public good. Now, however the money is cut up, services will continue. There's a reference earlier to the value of the fields. Well, in the asset register for Collerton Parish Council, these fields are registered at £1, I believe. In terms of the revenue that's used to support the cemetery is wholly owned, I believe, by Collerton Parish Council, and therefore they levy fees for interments and memorials and burials in that cemetery. So it's not the only revenue stream. The parish council also maintains the allotments. That generates a revenue. They also maintain and own several public buildings. They will acquire rent, and in all cases, it's the requirement of a parish council to do the best it can with the money it has. Now, Councillor Johns has raised a valid point that there are always winners and there are always losers in these situations, but a responsible parish council will look at its figures and will cut its coat according to its cloth. So, to summarise, I think the process has been done in accordance with the correct legislation. Of course, there are those who are dismayed and disheartened by it, but that is democracy. The people have spoken, and those who have not spoken have lost their right now to have a say. Their time to speak was then, not now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Bonetta, Jake.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, I just want to start by saying, obviously, I'm not a resident of Colyford. I happily reside in Honiton, and I'm a town councillor over there. I also had the joy, a couple of years back, of working with a campaign group called Honiton Forward on a CGR of our own in Honiton. Mark Williams knows very well about that, and I'm sure remembers it very fondly. However, I also did have the joy, much like Councillor Moulding, of attending school in Colyford for 7 years. I won't say how recently that was, for my own sanity and probably for everyone else's. I think what is in front of us here as a community governance review doesn't simply revolve around the amenities, the finances, and the structures in place. It revolves around a concept of democracy and a concept of identity. You don't need to be elected to live in Colyford, as far as I'm aware, as well, which I think is very important to say following Councillor Parr's points. But in terms of the concepts we're debating, I may be mistaken, but Colyton and Colyford are different villages. Colyford has its own mayor, its own burgesses. They have a fantastic goose fair every year. And they are different they have different identities. They are different places. This would give Colyford its own voice, but it would also give Colyton its own voice. which I think is important and hasn't been mentioned. I understand wanting to share the resources between villages, especially with local government cuts that we've seen across the board, which I'll come to later in the motion, and the cross-use of these resources. But I must say, on the points that have been made about that in terms of Colyford residents using the amenities in Collyton, yes, that is true, but I also go to Sidmouth and use their amenities, and Exmouth and use their amenities. We use amenities across the entire district, owned by all of the different parish councils. So I don't see that as a point whatsoever. I also remember one of the public speakers at the very beginning mentioning about the different amenities that are owned by the council. And I've noted very interestingly that there are 22 amenities owned by the parish council in Collyton and 2 in Colyford. Now, I'm not going to go into the individual decisions of that council because they are an independent and sovereign body. However, it really doesn't help the case that it is representative and financially spread across both of the communities when you have an asset register that is so heavily on the side of one village over the other. I know there's a population difference, but the point still stands. We're here as a district council to make these decisions, and we need to make them tonight. There's no point dilly-dallying, going back to the residents, trying another consultation, because what will you get? You'll get the same response rates and probably the same results. I'll be honest, in terms of a 29% response rate, I'd have been delighted if I got a 29% turnout in my by-election last year, whereas I actually got 25%, and that's in a local election for a local body. 29% response rate for a consultation like this is very, very high. Our petition in Honiton, I believe, hit about 13%, 15%, something like that, and that was on a very similar issue. So I must actually applaud the Residents' Association for managing to get so many responses. I think that is very good. I think that leaves me with one point left to say, and that is myself and the Labour group support these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonetta, and a very mature performance from one young enough to have been in the same class at school as my youngest. But there you go. It embarrasses me every time he has to say that. He's probably watching on the TV. Councillor Gardner, Cathy.
Thank you, Chair. I do remember the West Hill Ottery divorce. And Separation. It wasn't straightforward. I remember quite a few representations from the Ottery side saying what a bad idea it was. There were all kinds of disagreements. I don't remember the details, but I do remember it wasn't straightforward. But the will from West Hill, that's difficult to say, was that they had their own parish council, and that went ahead. And as Vicky says, you know, Ottery Town Council have learnt to live with that. This is a situation that isn't necessarily obvious to people who don't live in these places, and I think it's important that members remember that we need to be guided, I believe, by the results of the governance review, by the work put in by the officers, to come to these recommendations. I don't want to be swayed by the voices of a few people at a meeting tonight, because I just don't have enough background and knowledge of it, but I definitely know, as Councillor Bonetta said, that Colyford is a distinct place in its own right. It has the population. It's definitely a different place. And if the will of the people there is to have their own parish council, then I, as a district councillor, think that I should grant that. It seems that we followed all the rules as we should have done. We've done the process correctly, and this is the outcome. And I do commend my colleagues to agree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Councillor Skinner. Philip.
Thank you. I'm not going to go into the internet. Lots of things have been said, and I too am not a member of Collyton or Colyford, and it's not where I live. But I do believe in the process that's been taken place here, which I think has been done correctly, but I just asked the question, why at all? So I'd just like to go a little bit further back, because I've been here a little while, as Councillor Moding, Councillor Parr, and in fact Councillor Hughes, and in fact Councillor Ingham have been here a little while. We understand and have seen lots of things happen. The difference between Ottery St Mary and West Hill is quite significant compared to this. This is two small villages that are more or less coalesced with one another, quite closely coalesced. Ottery St Mary is a town. West Hill is a village, and there is a distinct difference between the two. West Hill is not a really small village, but is quite uniquely different from a town. So you could get to understand the reasoning behind why West Hill particularly wanted to manoeuvre itself into a place of having its own autonomy to be able to govern itself. That I can get. At the last cabinet meeting, sorry, not the emergency, the extraordinary one, but the one previous, there was also a conversation that took place from Councillor Hayward that actually mentioned that this has been done before, it's been done at West Hill and Ottery St Mary, and he kept repeating and Broadhembury. Well, I can tell you I'm the ward member for Broadhembury, and there is no separation of any parts of Broadhembury at all. What Broadhembury have done is because it has 4 or 5 hamlets to it, they wanted to increase the number of councillors so as there is more of a broader democratic process of the increasing councillors for that democratic process. Never no separation, and I wanted to make that point. I was never actually allowed to by the leader at the time. So where I believe we're going with this particular Colyford and Collerton, I just can't get my head around why. And I haven't heard anybody really come up with why. There's nothing that makes sense to me as to why. What I will say is this, and Councillor Moulding suggested, talking about what about Axminster Millway Rise. Well, I'll give you a different one. I'll give you all you Exmouth members. I'll give you what if Withycombe decides it wants to be on its own? What if Brixington decides it wants to be on? What if Littleham decides it wants to be on its own? And Marple decides it wants to be on its own? Where does that leave your town council? Be very careful what you wish for when you start down this road of going down this road of this autonomy. I don't believe personally, and make no mistake, makes not much odds to me one way or the other. I don't live in Collerton, but what I don't agree with is the principle of the breaking up of two very similar villages that are coalesced together, and I just don't understand why that would be. I will not be supporting this because I think it begins to open the Pandora's box, and I still just don't understand why. I've not had anybody, Councillor Gardner was speaking about she doesn't intend to change her view on just a few of the people sat in this room today. Well, I've always come to meetings open-minded, and I've never not yet heard, and I've been to a couple of meetings now, never yet heard a sound reason, full sound reason as to why you would do this. Don't get it. So on that basis, I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Ooh.
Skinner's entire argument, they're both villages, but Colleton's a town. So it's exactly like Ottery and West Hill. Colleton's a town, Colyford's
We were having that discussion here, and the Chief Executive might wish to comment on that.
I dare say there's someone who's going to tell me that Monmouth, the Monmouth Rebellion, but my understanding it's technically a village, not a town. I may be wrong, but that's my understanding. Collerton is technically a village.
Okay.
It says online Colleton is a town in East Devon.
Who says that though?
Right, okay. Can we, much though it's tempting to get into a vote as to whether Collerton is a town or a village, I'd actually quite like to avoid that tonight and move on if we could. I think the issues have been heard, but Jess, Councillor Bailey.
Yes, I'm not going to speak for very long, but I just want to respond to Councillor Skinner's comments. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I live in West Hill. I was on the Ottery St Mary Town Council. I was part of West Hill campaign group to set up a parish council. So I think I do have some experience to bring to bear. So Councillor Skinner says, I don't understand why. Don't get it. Well, I do get it, because I think if you, as a resident, have that feeling that your community needs to be self-determined, that you need to establish your democratic right and a democratically elected parish council, which Colyford wishes to, I totally get it. I totally understand. And I think, you know, the fact that there are more or less similarities than there are between West Hill and Ottery is actually neither here nor there. It looks as though everything's been done properly. And I can't see any justification for blocking it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson. Sarah.
Thank you. In response to a previous speaker, the why has actually been considered by this full council when considering the minutes from the first part of the consultation process, which established the why and whether or not that was something that the people of Colyford and Colyfton wanted to pursue. It makes up the background papers to this, but the response was quite clear, and that why is all around the idea of two separate identities. And it's clear from those responses that those from Colyford feel that they have a separate identity to those from Colyton. And it doesn't matter whether they're a town or a village. There are other villages that have separated because they felt they had two separate identities. And I don't think we can ignore that. So I compel members to seriously consider what voting against these recommendations would mean. And that's actually disregarding the majority of people that responded to the initial consultation about whether or not they felt they were a unique identity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. I'm going to take one more speaker, and then I would invite Councillor Parr very briefly to sum up, please, on the basis she did call the minute. So, Councillor Loudon next, please. John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak to this as a member of Cabinet who is now, this is the third time in a week that I've sat through a lot of this debate. That's not a criticism, it's just truth. We were faced as Cabinet with a request to separate, and that request was as allowed within the regulations. On Monday night, Cabinet spent, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, I think it was, going through all of the information presented to us, both in terms of documentation, plus also the public speakers, and then from memory, I think it was Councillor Parr and Councillor Moulding also spoke from memory. And so we have given this, I think, good due consideration. It's interesting that this isn't being challenged, the decision of Cabinet isn't being challenged because the due process affecting the whole of the request to separate has been flawed or not followed. So we've had tonight, we've had, I think from my interpretation is from what the leader said, or sorry, Councillor Arnott said in his address, he seemed to indicate he accepted process had been followed. Councillor Parr has said that tonight. Councillor Skinner has said that. So it's not a challenge to process. We seem to have got sidetracked into West Hill and other places. I'm bringing you back to the minutes and the issue under consideration on Monday night. So we effectively ratified the residents' vote. We considered the vesting arrangements. And as you've heard, the majority of our decisions went with Colyton. And I suspect the Colyford residents were less than content with that. But at the end of the day, as I said on the night, we adopted a fair and a feel-fair approach to what is, in effect, and I said this the other night, a divorce that has been initiated by one of the parties. That is what happens in life. It's very upsetting, but at the end of the day, we have to be grown up and we have to come to an amicable settlement. And that's what Cabinet did on Monday night. So I would ask colleagues to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Parr, we wouldn't normally, as you know, have somebody speaking more than once, but you've indicated. So what I would ask you in literally a couple of minutes maximum to sum up your reason, please.
Well, I indicated because I wanted to second Councillor Moulding's
Well, okay, thank you very much. No, that's absolutely fine. If that was what you wanted, I'd just got you down here as a speaker. That was all.
I subsequently, because I wasn't allowed to speak, heard various things said, and I just want to say, for information, West Hill is the size of Collyton. Collyton is about 2,000 people, and West Hill is about 2,000. And they were already a ward of Ottery with primary school, village hall, all these things. That what we're talking about is the main settlement of Collyton, then being separated from a small settlement of 800 residents. And if it's truly the wish of the residents, then Colyford Parish Council would have supported it. But they do not believe this questionnaire shows the true feelings of residents, and I cannot support.
Okay. Thank you very much for the clarification. Sorry, the reason we didn't push ahead with the amendment was, in fact, the amendment was largely redundant because the vote, it didn't change the vote that was actually put forward, which was we take the recommendation from Cabinet or we don't. So that was the reasoning for that. So what I propose to do now is go to the vote. Pardon? No, Councillor Moulding. I think we've gone through enough of the things now, because we actually only had Councillor Parr who actually called the minutes. So I was going to allow her to sum up, but it isn't actually done in the same way. But we haven't actually proposed anything.
Yeah, he did. He proposed rejection.
Oh, sorry, you proposed. Okay. Under advice, if you could keep it to 2 minutes maximum, please. I like that.
Were asked to respond to a questionnaire, which I have here. At the bottom it says, thank you for taking your time to fill in this questionnaire. Please return it by using the closed envelope. There was no indication that any response to that questionnaire would lead to the separation of the two villages. And that was why I mentioned earlier that residents weren't given the full detail and financial implications of any decision they should made, and that it should be allowed to vote by ballot. And that's what I would suggest, and that's why I suggested that this motion should be turned down.
Okay, well, effectively what we're voting on is either accepting the recommendation as put by Cabinet or rejecting it, but members should be aware that the implication of rejecting the recommendation as outlined by the monitoring officer would effectively be to force a restart of the whole process, if indeed that was to be sought in the future. So basically, the recommendation, all those in favour of the recommendation, please, as put by Cabinet, if you would please indicate. This is in favour of the recommendation as put by Cabinet. Oh, any against, please?
Clearly carried.
That's clearly carried. Thank you very much. Cabinet's recommendation is accepted. On that basis, could you please move your minutes now, Councillor Hayward, for the meeting of the 5th of November?
So moved, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favour of agreeing the minutes is a true record? Thank you very much. I can confirm those minutes are agreed as a true record. Is this what they call a walk-on part, is it, Mr. Daly? Yes? You look like that chap off Pointless. Has anybody got any monetary questions they'd like to ask our finance officer? You know, just to keep him in, give a little essay would be nice. Right, we're obviously minutes of scrutiny. Who's the vice chair of scrutiny, please? Oh, sorry. Apparently, I've been told we ought to tell the leader he can come back. Every cloud. Okay, well, apparently I can move from the chair minutes of Scrutiny Committee briefing meetings held on 2nd and 3rd of November and Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of November. Could I invite members to vote in favour or against agreeing those minutes? Ooh. Thank you very much. That's comfortably supported. I confirm, therefore, that minutes are agreed as a true record. Then next I've got Councillor Chamberlain, Housing Review Board on the 11th of October. Okay, moving it from the chair. I'll tell you what, we'll get into the swing here if everybody leaves quickly. Can I move the minutes of the Housing Review Board meeting held on the 11th of October 22? I invite members to vote in favour or against agreeing the minutes. Thank you very much. Can now confirm minutes are agreed as a true record. Councillor Arnott. Minutes of the Strategic Planning Committee on the 7th of November and 7th of October and 1st of November.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to present.
Thank you very much. Can I invite members to vote in favour or against agreeing those minutes? All those in favour? Thank you. Can confirm minutes are agreed as a true record. Councillor Ragg. Minutes of the Planning Committee held on 25th of October and 15th of November.
Thank you, Chair. So moved the minutes.
Thank you very much. Can I invite members to vote in favour or of the minutes? Any against? No? Okay. I can confirm those minutes are agreed as a true record. Next. Well, I know Councillor Wibley's here. Councillor Wibley, minutes of licensing and enforcement on 26th of October.
Could I just interrupt your flow briefly by saying...
No.
I'm going to anyway, Chair, if that's with your forbearance. I think, just for the record, that was an emergency, extraordinary meeting rather than a not extraordinary one. Just for the record. But
I'm sure your meetings are all extraordinary, Joe. So
absolutely.
So can I invite members to vote, please, in favour or against? In favour of the minutes? Thank you. Can confirm minutes are agreed as a true record. Councillor Hawkins, Audit and Governance on the 17th of November 2022.
So moved.
We're getting good at this now, aren't we? Can I invite members to vote in all those in favour, please? Thank you. I can confirm minutes are agreed as a true record. Oh, Councillor Thomas. I'd like to move the minutes of the Personnel Committee meeting held on the 28th of November. Can I have any in favour, please, of agreeing those minutes? Oh, good, that's all right. Megan, were you in favour then or not? Oh. Yeah, I've got the reminder. And just one of the things that we do have as arising from that is that we have it's because obviously the imminent departure of our monitoring officer, Mr. Gordon Lennox, who I'm sure we all wish an extraordinarily successful time in Cornwall and all the luck which he'll need. But our best wishes for that, Henry. But we do need to... But that does mean we have to find a replacement. So to do that, we are, as you know, the Personnel Committee is setting up an interviewing subcommittee to deal with the recruitment process, and has invited me to chair that, which... but the interesting thing, of course, is what it does require is has to be politically balanced and requires nominations, please, from the leader of the Conservative group for 3 people to take part in that process, and also from the leader of the Democratic Alliance for 3 people. And I've been asked to push this forward if we could, because we do have quite sharp timetable to secure an appropriate replacement. So if Councillor Skinner and Councillor Arlott, if you could make sure that the Chief Executive has your nominations by the end of the week, that would be much appreciated. And these nominations have to come from within the membership of the Personnel Committee or identified stand-ins, just so that's clear. Or identified stand-ins. You do actually have a... Okay, so that's, if you could do that, that'd be brilliant. Councillor Armstrong, are you...
Yes, well, I'm a member of the Personnel Committee, so where do I get a say?
Yeah, so it's politically balanced. So on the balance, only those...
So I'm out in the cold, am I?
Well, I won't say you're in the cold, but your group is not entitled to a seat on the political balance.
Chief Executive.
Yeah, so just to reassure all members, not just other members of the Personnel Committee, what I'm intending to bring is an update once I get the nominations, please. But when I've got those nominations, the idea is to bring an update, probably first opportunity in the new year, about the process. So the technical voting in terms of the appointment will need to be by the subcommittee, recommended through to full council. But the process of interview, we are hoping to design something that allows other councillors to get involved, to meet the candidates, maybe participate in a role play or something. I mean, I haven't finalised it yet, but the idea is to have a wider involvement of other councillors, albeit, you know, when it comes to the formal interview, if you like, it will be with those 7 councillors.
Sorry, Chair, just through you quickly. It's just that I do have experience of this sort of thing, many, many years of a hiring and firing and so on. So I do know a bit about that. Sorry, seriously, I have experience of this, and so I would be interested in being involved in some way, if that's possible.
Sorry, I fully understand that, and you know, it is a senior appointment, statutory officer, so I would want more members to be engaged in that process, albeit probably not all 60.
No, hopefully that's reassuring. Councillor Bailey. Jess.
Yes, I was pleased to hear Councillor Loudon's comments in the Personnel Committee about ensuring there's gender equality on that subcommittee. So I hope that... Sorry? Are you saying something?
Could you continue, please, Councillor Bailey?
And I hope that that's something that both groups will try to achieve, and you will too as chair. Thank you.
Yeah, just to fill you in immediately on that one, there are practical difficulties of that, because the gender ban, as I said, it was quite clear to say at the beginning, the members of this interviewing subcommittee now need to come from within the ranks of the Personnel Committee. That's the first point, and the Personnel Committee itself has limited amounts of, there's limited gender diversity or diversity in general, though Councillor Armstrong's comments were obviously noted. And there was another part of that as well, and Councillor Lown, can you refresh me? What was the other bit? It was, and also what the other thing that we were actually looking to do as well, which does actually ring true with Councillor Armstrong, is recognise the importance of relevant experience in terms of recruitment processes of senior managers within organisations, and that we did actually ask that the leaders might bear that in mind when selecting their representative members of the subcommittee. So we did cover off both of those items in our discussion. That would be fair, would it not? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right. But we did confirm the minutes before all that, didn't we? I haven't forgotten again to confirm my own minutes. Agenda item 10 is report on changes to governance arrangements. This short report requests Council agree proposed changes to audit and governance and strategic planning committees following recent membership changes. Henry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to
Councillor Miller will be pleased. You see, you weren't listening then, were you? You missed an important report. Can I invite members to vote in favour or against? We'll go and take those in favour first, agreeing the report and its recommendations. Those in favour, thank you very much. Clearly carried again. Moving on, I can confirm that the monitoring officer's report and recommendations therein are agreed. On to agenda item 11. Motion on local government needs adequate and immediate and longer-term government funding. This is proposed, I should make sure I get the right one. Proposed by Councillor Rowland. If you'd like to propose this, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I could say a few words to start with, and I will read out what's on the agenda paper as well as adding a few other points. So according to a recent comment by the Local Government Association, and I quote, "Local government is the fabric of our society and country. It provides more than 800 services and positively impacts the daily life of every person in every community. However, the future financial sustainability of councils is on a cliff edge, and the scale of the pressures cannot be met by reducing costs, making efficiencies, or raising council tax. Many now face the prospect of having to make severe cutbacks to local services. This will not only damage our communities, but massively undermine government ambitions to boost economic growth, level up the country, and help residents through the cost of living crisis. Inflation is not going to come down overnight. Reserves can only be spent once, and a local service cannot be cut twice." That's ending the quote from the Local Government Association. I'd now like to move on to another quote that was made as recently as October from James Jameson, the Conservative Chair of the Local Government Association, who said, "Councils are now having to try to find ways to meet these costs this year and limit the damage to the local services that many people rely on. In the past decade, councils have done more than their fair share of the heavy lifting when it came to putting public finances on a more sustainable footing, having faced a £15 billion real terms reduction to core government funding between 2010 and 2020. That ends his quote. The government needs to ensure councils have the funding to meet ongoing pressures and protect the services that would be vital to achieve the ambitions for growth and to produce a more balanced economy, level up communities and help residents through the cost of living crisis. All of this provides a backdrop to the current financial difficulties facing local authorities, as the Local Government Association has calculated that rising inflation, the national living wage and energy costs have left councils facing a £2.4 billion in extra cost pressures in this current financial year, with estimated funding gap of £3.4 billion in 2023-24 and £4.5 billion in 2024-25. Indeed, the Local Government Association has warned against further cuts to local government funding, in addition to the cumulative loss of £15 billion of central government funding during the period 2010 to 2020. Underfunding local services also has a knock-on effect on the wider economy, business and residents and other public services. To reinforce this picture locally, on the 1st of November, the Conservative leader of Devon County Council, Councillor John Hart, said, quote, "I have been a county councillor for nearly 14 years, and during which time we have been through the austerity years and the COVID pandemic, but our financial situation has never been so bleak as it is now." End of quote. This picture, even more locally for East Devon District Council, shows that in real terms, since 2010, this council has lost £51.8 million in central government funding. This has held back service development, investments in key infrastructure, including building more social housing to meet the demand, and led to resident and businesses having to pay more. However, with adequate funding, and not just yearly settlements, but longer-term settlements, councils can protect and invest in local services, deliver for our communities, support economic growth by having a pump primer for other investment, and really level up everywhere. This is why the Local Government Association is calling for a longer-term government plan to manage the crisis in councils' finances and has warned against cutting their funding. We have to, by law, balance our budget every financial year, which means when costs rise, we must find equivalent savings in the budget elsewhere, and for the subsequent budget, or a combination by increasing charges. Even then, as a district council, we have constraints, as the current limit on raising the council tax precept still applies at either 1.99% or £5 per annum, whichever is the greater. And the fees chargeable in respect of planning applications are set by central government and have not increased for a number of years. So East Devon District Council faces pressures on three fronts. One, the reduction in central government funding. Two, the constraints on raising the council tax precept and increasing the planning fees. And three, the current inflationary pressures. I also wanted to give some examples of the financial pressures that have been faced by East Devon District Council since I became the finance portfolio holder. Most of you are aware that Leisure East Devon manage many assets that are owned by this council. As a result of the COVID lockdown period, the income for Leisure East Devon was dramatically hit, resulting in this council providing total funding of £1.874 million in two tranches. To offset this cost, we received a total of £299,000 from the National Leisure Recovery Grant, making a net cost to this council of the support to Leisure East Devon of £1.574 million. And despite making pleas to central government and via the local MPs, those requests fell on deaf ears and were in stark contrast to the level of support that would have been available if those services provided by Leisure East Devon had been directly supplied by East Devon District Council, as we could have claimed 75% of those losses above the first 5%, amounting to over £1.3 million. So we ended up actually worse off as a council by over £1 million because of those measures in place. As recently as this Monday, I chaired a budget setting and capital allocation meeting where we considered a total of 31 capital bids for a total of nearly £4 million. Many of these were approved for recommendation for approval by Cabinet, and the borrowing costs to come from general fund account could be as much as £242,000 per annum. Many of those bids involve urgent remedial work to assets owned by this council. As an example, roofing works at Exmouth Tennis Centre, where I was actually horrified to find out that as long ago as 15 years ago, that the roof leaked, causing issues for using the indoor tennis courts. The two examples I've quoted are just two of many, and despite this council will still balance the books by the end of this financial year without cutting any services, thanks to the skills of our Chief Financial Officer, Simon Davey, and his team. But that task becomes ever more difficult to achieve if nothing changes in terms of central government funding in future financial years, if not impossible without impacting the current services provided. To save the services we all rely on, councils need adequate funding in line with inflation and the demand for services and certainty to plan their budgets to minimise service disruption, which is why the Local Government Association is running its Save Local Services campaign via the link that was shown in the agenda papers. I hope all members here this evening will support the following. This council resolves to 1. Endorse James Jamieson's and John Hart's quoted concerns about the poor local government funding of the past decade and the need for government to now adequately fund this sector. 2. Register its support for the Local Government Association Save Local Services campaign. 3. Publicly promote implications of the poor local government funding of the past decade and the need for the government to now adequately fund this sector. 4. Work with other Devon local authorities, preferably through Devon Team Devon, to lobby for adequate local government funding both in the immediate and longer term. And 5. To invite our local MPs to support this council's local government funding concerns and to work with East Devon District Council and other Devon local authorities in lobbying for adequate local government funding, both in the immediate and longer term. Thank you, Chair. And when this is actually seconded by Councillor Loudon, I've already spoken to him as well, and I would like to ask as well for a recorded vote on this motion that we have before us. Thank you.
Okay, well, what we need to do first is that if we're going to do that, then let's just have a quick vote. All those in favour of recorded vote, please. Sorry, we need a seconder. We want a couple of seconders. It doesn't matter. All those in favour of recorded vote. Any against? Clearly carried. The recorded vote will be held in due course. Councillor Loudon, seconder. Would you like to speak, please?
Chair, I formally second and reserve my right.
Oh, very formal. we obviously, this is recognising the fact that members only get a chance to speak once in these debates. So Councillor Loudon clearly doesn't want to peak too early. Do any of the supporters wish to speak at this stage? No? Okay, then open to general. Councillor Skinner. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like a point of clarification, if I may, please, and whether I get it from our Chief Executive, whether I ask Simon Davey. And I'm just wondering whether this particular motion, and much of what's been said, and very well done to Councillor Rowland for putting out his synopsis of where we are today, and it was a very accurate synopsis, and lots of what was said within that we can all absolutely agree with. But the question I really wanting to ask here is I believe I'm aware and correct in saying that the government review is coming out on local authorities within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Certainly, I'm understanding either just prior to Christmas or just after. And if that is the case, would this motion not actually be premature? But what I need to be is sure on my understanding that I've been told and understand that that's the position that we're in. Could I get clarification on that from either Chief Exec or Mr. Simon Davey?
Councillor Davey to do it.
So my understanding is the details of the local government financial settlement for next year will be announced on the 21st of December.
Yeah, I've got week beginning the 19th.
Okay. My understanding is the 21st of December, but in terms of the relevance of that to this motion, I would say that this is a motion that is being encouraged by the Local Government Association across the country. And the Local Government Association, I think, at the moment is Conservative controlled, so I don't see it as a particularly political matter. This is about, the fair and future funding of local government, really.
Thank you very much.
The reason I raised the issue at this particular moment in time, Chair, through you, if you don't mind, is because obviously in raising such a motion, I absolutely understand what the Chief Executive has said is coming from the Local Government Association and others as well. But to me, it would surely only make sense, would it not, to actually wait until we see what that is, because once we see what that is, the motion may not have gone in the first place, unless you want to clarify that position for me, please, Chief Executive.
Well, I can ask Simon to give you a bit of chapter and verse around what we've put into the draft budget assumptions for next year, because they're already sort of laid out, if you like, in terms of the medium-term financial plan. but it's not going to be a Christmas present, Philip. So.
Mr. Davey.
Just to add to the Chief Exec's statement, the finance settlement will just keep within the overall controls that were announced with the autumn statement. So we already know the level of funding that's likely to come. What we don't know is the individual authority numbers, but overall local government finance, the funding levels have been static now for next year. So there's no increases. And there's been a lot of pressure on inflation that has been put forward from the Local Government Association, and that hasn't been reflected in the control totals that we've seen for the department spend. So we're certain that there will be no increases, but it's the level affecting each authority that was still to be confirmed.
Thank you for that
Thank you very much for that
Simon.
clarification, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Bonetta. Jake.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Obviously, been reading this motion, and I think it's absolutely fantastic to see that there are some prominent Conservative councillors from across the United Kingdom backing this and actually quoted in this. However, let's not forget that the hand we're begging for more money from was the hand that starved us in the first place, with 37% real terms cuts from 2010 to 2020 in national grant. That's excluding business rates and council tax. In fact, if you include council tax and business rates, overall council spending power, including those things, has fallen by 16% in the same time. So there are some massive issues here. I completely agree with the motion that we should be backing this campaign. I think that this campaign hasn't come soon enough. I think that these things have been needed for a long, long time. And I want to just comment very briefly on one thing that Councillor Skinner just said. He talks about this being a bit premature. I would ask him why these changes hadn't been made by government years ago. But hey, that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miller.
He's just played bad cop. I'm going to play good cop. I just think we all need to vote for this unanimously. This isn't a political trap, I would say to Councillor Skinner. All local authorities are probably voting for this at the moment, including Conservative-run ones. It's not going to be a shameful episode if the Conservatives vote with this. I would beg them not to abstain, as I think they might be, and vote. We don't need a recorded vote, we just need everyone putting their hands in the air.
Councillors, please. Right, I don't actually have any more indicated speakers, so unless Councillor Loudon wants to abdicate completely, no? No? Councillor Loudon, please. Paul. John, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Well, after those very interesting inputs into the debate, just coming back to what was said about the impending financial settlement, that if one reads this motion, this is talking about why and how we've got to where we are. If you listen to what Councillor Rowland said, he explained the impact upon this council, our residents, our businesses, of what has gone on over the past decade or so. That is part of what the motion is about. It is also about what do we do into the future. I think all of us in this room would love to know what is coming down the track financially. Certainly, I guess, our Section 141 officer would like to know what the financials are going to be in 2 or 3 years' time. Might make his job a little bit easier, I suspect. But that's not why we're having this motion. It's not to make Simon's life too easy. We don't want to do that. We're putting a marker down. We are supporting the LGA. We are part of the LGA. And as Councillor Rowland has explained through the motion, the chair of the LGA is absolutely putting a marker down to government. He is saying enough is enough. Through this motion, we are saying enough is enough. We're saying that short-term and long-term there needs to be financial change. And what we're doing here is giving grist to the mill to the LGA, which, as the Chief Executive said a minute ago, this isn't an individual party issue. This is a cross-party issue led by the chair of the LGA. So therefore, I hope that all of us in this room will give it unanimous support, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Loudon. I don't have any other people. Loudon? Right, it was probably. I'm sorry. I was just stunned by the fact that was the move from a Section 151 officer to a Section 141 officer a central government cut you were talking about? Was this? Right. Okay. Anyway, all joking apart, back to the serious matter of the funding and the motion. I don't have any more speakers, so Councillor Rowland, if you'd like to briefly sum up, then we'd take a vote, please.
I don't think I need to sum up in view of what's already been said, so I actually...
Thank you very much. It's obviously getting near Christmas. This. Yeah, you did actually ask for a recorded vote, and that was agreed. So, on the basis we still want to progress, can we do whatever needs doing with that? Over to you, Sue. All those please in favour of the motion as presented in all respects, we'll take it together. You say aye or in favour, or those against say against.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, unfortunately, council did vote for a show of hands. Sorry, it did vote for a recorded vote. So, are we afraid we're going to have to go through with one?
Okay.
Quickly, can we do it quickly?
Councillor Armstrong.
You can't. Sorry, can we please, members? The quicker we get through this, the quicker we'll get home. Thank you. Sue.
Councillor Armstrong. 4. Councillor Arnott.
4.
Councillor Bailey. 4. Councillor Bickley. 4. Councillor Blakey. 4. Councillor Bloxham. 4. Councillor Bonetta.
4.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Burrup. 4. Councillor Cagill. 4. Councillor Chapman. 4. Councillor Chubb. Gone. Councillor Coleman. 4. Councillor Desarum.
4.
Councillor Dent.
4.
Councillor Faithful. 4. Councillor Gardner. 4. Councillor Gazzard. 4. Councillor Hawkins. 4. Councillor Haywood. 4. Councillor Hookway.
4.
Councillor Hughes. 4. Councillor Ingham. 4. Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Johns. 4. Councillor Young. 4. Councillor Loudon.
4.
Councillor Manley. 4. Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Moulding. Councillor Parr. Okay, said 4. Councillor Rickson. 4. Councillor Rowland.
4.
Councillor Rylance. 4. Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Taylor. 4. Councillor Thomas.
4.
Councillor Wibley. 4. Councillor Woodward.
4.
Councillor Ragg.
4.
Councillor Chris Wright. Councillor Tom Wright.
4.
Well, I think that was close. that was a lovely rehearsal, but I mean, I must admit, that sitting here and hearing everybody burst into laughter as they shouted 4 was quite hard to watch. But if you wanted a vote as to whose was the most impressive, it was clearly Councillor Dent at the back, who, to be totally honest, is clearly practiced in this sort of thing. Anyway, moving on to agenda item 12. Voter identification. The Chief Executive set this as the last item so he could go home early by excusing himself. So we're waiting until he leaves the room. I can't see who's actually proposed it. It's Jess, isn't it?
Jess Bailey.
Councillor Bailey. Jess.
Thank you. Well, it's always a tough gig being the last motion and everybody's slipping away. But I think this is a really, really, really important motion about photographic ID. And the Conservative government's new rules that require voters to bring photographic ID from May 2023 represents a fundamental and unprecedented change in the voting process. In my view, these proposals are unfair, unjustified and unworkable. They're unfair, totally unfair, because they're skewed in favour of older voters who are typically more likely to vote Conservative. And my colleague, Councillor Wibley, is going to talk about the impact on younger voters. They're totally unjustified. In 2021, when millions took to the polls in England, Wales and Scotland for elections for the Scottish Parliament, the Senate, police and crime commissioners, local councils and local mayors, combined authority mayors, the Mayor of London and London Assembly, and 6 parliamentary by-elections, in all of those elections, cautions were only issued to 2 people for the offence of personation. The new legislation is a sledgehammer to crack a non-existent nut. But worse than that, in cracking that non-existent nut, it will be used to deny thousands, possibly millions of people their right to vote. And typically, those voters will be people who will not vote Conservative. This is not about voter fraud, it's about voter suppression. And it's about creating an uneven playing field designed to make it easier for Conservative candidates to win, whether in local or national elections. And I think the Conservative government should hang its head in shame. Free and fair elections have always been the hallmark of this country's democracy, and yet it's set to be undermined by this new grubby legislation with a technique straight out of any authoritarian dictator's playbook. Unworkable. These proposals are totally unworkable, but don't take my word for it. The Constitution Society surveyed councils and nearly half, 45%, said they were not confident that they can train staff on new voter ID requirements. Letters from the Electoral Commission obtained by Open Democracy raised concerns on the 20th of September when the chair of the Electoral Commission warned the then, of course we've had various levelling up secretaries, on the 20th of September, Simon Clarke, that delays to legislation are causing fundamental concerns. And what they said was that crucially, there is now insufficient time for the Commission to test the free voter authority certificate application form and other materials. And as a result, it's our view that it's no longer possible for the voter ID requirement to be delivered in a way that's fully secure, accessible and workable ahead of the elections in May 2023. And government research shows that 4% of people don't have recognisable ID. And in the East Devon constituency alone, that means nearly 3,000 people could be applying to the District Council for a voter authority certificate. Yet you cannot even apply yet because the details haven't been published. So what's going to happen in our district if hundreds of residents apply for the certificate on the last day when they're eligible to do so? How's our small team of electoral officers meant to cope with that? How are we going to make the polling stations appropriate and culturally sensitive so that people can show their face in private and reassemble their headwear? How can we expect our presiding officers to look at 10-year-old photos and match them with electors? And what if driving licences are still in maiden names? Ignoring their advisers has proved costly to the Conservative government and for the country as a whole. Just look at the impact of the mini-budget. They're ignoring their advisers now and pressing on with a scheme which is doomed to failure and yet again will prove a total embarrassment nationally and internationally. And I hope that you will support my motion because we can't just sit silently by and watch this disaster unfold.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. Second, Councillor Wibley. Joe.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the Electoral Reform Society have long argued that voter ID is an unnecessary distraction, but that the risks involved in getting it wrong are significant. So I'd just like to talk briefly about the possibility of potential discrimination, whether that be deliberate or not. So the structural implementation of this is fundamentally flawed. Put simply, it's easier to vote as a mature adult than it is as a young adult. So take, for example, the Oyster card in London. A 60-plus Oyster card is deemed to be valid election ID, but an 18-plus Oyster card is not. There's no justification for this. So it seems that voter ID is one of the few areas in which being elderly or disabled is not a barrier to access. So if we have a look at the list of what are acceptable forms of identification, we have a blue badge, an older person's bus pass, a disabled person's bus pass, an Oyster 60-plus card, a Freedom Pass, a 60 and over Welsh concessionary travel card issue in Wales. There's a long list of Wales, Northern Ireland, but all for people who have met retirement age or have a registered disability. So the Electoral Reform Society successfully campaigned for an amendment that, to this bill that would have led to the following forms of ID being acceptable: student ID cards, library cards, and bank statements, all things that would be easily accessible to young people. But when it reached the final reading of the bill, this amendment was repealed. So young voters are left with a passport or a driving licence as the only viable forms of ID that they have. And quite simply, not everyone has these. The way that statistics are recorded in this country makes it difficult to find an exact number, but anything from 500,000 to about 700,000 from what I can make out, people won't have any of these. And yes, they can apply for a voter identification certificate, but why should they have to? And bearing in mind some of the problems with that that were outlined by Councillor Bailey. So we're trying to involve as many young people as possible in the process of democracy and imbue them with a sense that local and national politics matters and they must play their part. We've been saying this for a long time as we see turnouts at various elections fall. The youth in the country becoming disaffected in terms of, caring about politics. But this does the exact opposite of that. This puts up an unnecessary barrier designed to influence election results because the common wisdom says that as you get older, your politics move to the right. This is a blatant attempt at potentially social and political engineering, which will do nothing but divide young and old. When I got elected, one of the things I wanted to do was to increase participation of younger residents in democratic activity, and this makes it really difficult. So our elections are deemed to be amongst the safest in the world, and it looks like we're fixing a non-existent problem. And through the LGA, similar to the previous motion, we have an opportunity to make our voice heard by passing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I've got Councillor Bonetta. Jake, from the supporters.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points from me. Firstly, it's great to see the Conservative National Government finally taking up, in some form at least, Tony Blair's original drop policies for ID cards nationally. I think it's absolutely fantastic that they are, again, stealing Labour's ideas. In general, I support the need for ID cards, which may surprise a couple of people. When done correctly and when given to absolutely everyone, they can actually remove barriers. When given freely and openly with no access barriers whatsoever, can help with equality, can help with justice, open access to all forms of work, and right-to-work documents also makes it much easier in that sense. However, what we've got here is a half-baked option which is, frankly, discriminatory against young people. And I'm saying that as a young person who also campaigns in student-dominated areas. I have the pleasure of campaigning quite a lot in certain wards in Exeter, very near the university, and the number of student doors I already knock on who don't know that they can vote in their own in that city council area and haven't registered to vote is already staggering. Adding on to that, the fact you need to say, oh, let's go and get a voter ID card, it's another barrier once again, which we need to overcome. And frankly, many of my colleagues and my friends, they don't have the time for it as well, being at university. And I mean, a lot of them don't have driving licences either, so it just compounds the issue. The motion sums it up very well. It's saying that voter fraud is very low. Councillor Bailey summed it up very, very well by saying there were 2 cases in all of those elections, which I think really just shows currently the existing strength that we already have in our election systems. And personally, this does affect people that are like me, that look like me, that hang around in the same circles as me. It affects my friends, my cousins, my 18-year-old sister who's going to vote for the first time in May. So when we look at the list of ID that Councillor Whibley just mentioned, and we see actually the staggering difference that this could make to the ability of young people to vote, I have massive reservations, and it is, again, personal. I will be supporting this motion, and I think that the proposer and seconder summed it up absolutely perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From supporters, I've still got a couple of speakers indicated. Councillor Arnott. Paul.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be brief. I've had the opportunity to talk this through at an operational level for the implications at our own council. And it's quite right that the CEO, in his role as ERO, has left tonight because he felt there might be a conflict of interest there. Look, it's hard enough to recruit presiding officers and people to run the elections even next May, let alone having to take people who have been used to being in scout huts or village halls. Somebody comes in with a simple piece of paper and you're sent over there with a bit of pencil and a form and you place a cross. They are now going to have to be required to be trained before May to be able to run something that is basically a quasi-passport operation service equivalent to coming into the country. It is naked gerrymandering. It has come from the far right within the Conservative Party, inspired by Trump and, well, Councillor Skinner may laugh, and I know he isn't from the far right, but your party, Councillor Skinner, through you, Chair, is infested with it at the moment. It is gerrymandering designed to deny the vote to people who aren't natural Conservatives. My children, I have 4 kids, one of them, precisely as Councillor Bonetta has identified, and I slightly despair of him, hasn't managed to yet pass his driving test, even though he's 32, and he doesn't have a current passport. Because of COVID, he hasn't been out of the country for the last 3 years. What is he meant to do? Councillor Whibley rightly identified that the way in which the amendment was denied was extraordinary, and I'm pretty certain some local Devon MPs voted with that against that amendment as well. So I commend Councillor Bailey for drafting a brilliant motion and a great speech to go with it, and Councillor Whibley too for seconding it. It's really serious. It's going to be a crisis for us in May, and you know, thanks to our officers in advance for how they're going to try and manage this, because at the moment we don't actually know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll be very brief because the hour's late. I'm delighted to support this motion. This does come down to some key points, and previous speakers have covered it pretty much. The actual likelihood of someone impersonating another voter is so low that a recent study found that you're more likely to be eaten by a shark than you are to impersonate a voter. Not whilst voting, but generally. And I suppose that for those of us who don't live in coastal communities, that's an even rarer percentage. But the point being is that for those of us who've travelled, we've all, I'm sure, been at passport bays around the world where an overeager passport control officer has looked at your passport, looked at you, looked at your passport. Because your passport's 9 years old, people change. Only last week I had a absolutely nonsensical bit of facial hair. It's gone. But if my passport still had that, I'd be gazed at. Now, for me, the loss, the risk that one genuine voter is turned away because someone says, this isn't you on this passport, or your driving licence is still in your maiden name. That is too big a price to pay, because democracy is incredibly important. I've always voted. And the fact that one person can be turned away because of a bureaucratic decision on the basis that there is this supposedly rampant electoral fraud. I've looked at the stats. In 2021, there were 256 elections or electoral events. And half of the incidents of so-called electoral fraud, in quotation marks, were actually due to campaigning, where candidates had not, or otherwise, put their imprint on their leaflet. So that's not voter impersonation, but it's all lumped in together. And as Councillor Bailey says, it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and actually a nut that doesn't exist. But for me, the thing that really upsets me the most is the potential cost. Councillor Arnott has covered the cost to in time and effort and recruitment, but the actual cost estimated is £180 million. £180 million to solve a problem that doesn't exist. So that's something like 6,000 nurses, 6,000 teachers. That's 6 payouts to someone in the House of Lords for dodgy PPE contracts. You know, we've got to put these things into perspective, but it just is nonsensical. And I too applaud what Councillor Bonetta says. You know, we have to protect democracy, but not in some half-baked way that evidently is being done to engineer an advantage in an election. And that's reprehensible. And I would urge every member here to represent democracy and say to the people up top who are pushing this through, no, enough's enough. You can't do this. But if they vote for it and they say, no, we definitely need it, I'll have to challenge them as to whether they truly do believe in democracy or whether just getting voted is more important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I've got through all the supporters who've indicated now, and so I want to Councillor Desar and Bruce.
Thank you very much, Chair. I note that, sadly, some might say, as I was a young student, my politics has personally never changed, but that aside, I also note what we've said, that voter fraud is very low. You've got issues about driving licenses being issued in the maiden name, but I think the key in any process is actually to protect democracy, and I think it's very important that suitable identification is provided just simply to safeguard our democratic processes. So obviously I feel that it's with great reluctance that I won't be able to support this motion as it's set out tonight, but I certainly am not, I wouldn't consider myself anti-democratic, but I'll leave it there, and thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Desarum. Councillor Skinner. Philip, from the right wing or not the right wing of the
Part
Conservative
of the
Party.
very right-wing party, I guess. I don't know whether to shout Republic. And I wonder whether this is a motion about vote identification or whether it's damn the Tories no matter what. But anyway, I'm going to focus on the issue at hand, which is the issue at hand that has come forward, regardless of all the hang our heads in shame and all this other nonsense that carried on here earlier. At the end of the day, what we're talking about, whether it's eating sharks or sharks eating you or whatever it is that we're talking about, we're talking about fraud. We're talking about fraud that at the end of the day should not be tolerated at any cost at all. When we talk about democracy, democracy should be free, it should be open, and anything that is going to undermine democracy, in my opinion, should not be supported at all. I absolutely understand some of the issues that have been raised by people, but I can tell you one thing: when we talk about young Councillor Bonetta here talking about young people being disadvantaged, and Councillor Bailey talking about this is all gaining its way to Conservatives, absolute nonsense. If there's one thing that young people have in their armament today, it's mobile phones, and if there's one thing they know how to absolutely operate, it's mobile phones. You can pay with your mobile phones. The identification of coming through the mobile phone system is something, a way that people could have identification, whether through forms, whether a system that the government is putting forward. It needs to be supported. I will not decry any motion that in my way, and Councillor Bruce de Sarm absolutely suggested earlier, I am for democracy in as big a way that I can actually support it in any way that I will. And as I said before, I don't think that the price to be paid for freedom of speech and to be clear of democracy and clear of fraud is something we must stand up to. Absolutely. I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Burhop. Chris, maiden performance.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll try and be briefer than brief if Councillor Hayward's brief is anything to go by. But what I will say is, as the newest elected member here, I'm the person who has most recently experienced and been humbled by nearly 800 people going out to vote on a cold November day. And what terrifies me, frankly, is those people, some of those people, being rejected at the polling station in future because they haven't got the right form of identification with them. I've spoken to people in my ward so far about this. They're completely oblivious to the future need of voter identification. I know that advertising is coming, etc., but I will absolutely support what Councillor Bailey and Councillor Whibley have said in terms of this motion, in that it seems to be an awful lot of expense to crack a non-existent problem. And were we to suggest that we invest £180 million, as the number has been bandied about tonight, to crack some other non-existent problem, we'd be laughed out of court. Now, Councillor Skinner has mentioned the use of mobile phones by young people. Unfortunately, in the parish of Newton Poppleford, mobile phones don't work everywhere. So we find that actually half of the mobile phones operators do not work in our ward. So I think this is a dangerous disenfranchisement of future electors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Wright. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I was heartened by Councillor Bonetta's statement that there should be a proper way of identifying people in this country for a whole range of reasons. And I do echo Councillor Skinner's views that our electoral system must be as foolproof as it can be against fraud. But I don't think the photographic ID system is something that's going to achieve that anyway. I know from reading the press and in the past, some of the biggest voter frauds has in fact been through the postal voting system, because you never know who's putting who's actually receiving the voting form in a house of multiple occupation, and you don't know who's filling the form in and sticking it back in the envelope. So I support this motion, not because of the views expressed as to the motive behind it, but because I don't think it will be as effective as it needs to be, and what this country needs is a proper way where people can be all identified so that we can be sure that the people who are voting are in fact have the right to vote and who they say they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Jackson. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just circle back a little bit to the representation made by Councillor Bonetta. I was one of those people. I didn't pass my driving test till I was 27, and between the ages of about 18 and 27, I also didn't have a passport because I didn't go anywhere. I also voted at every given opportunity, but there are a lot of other people who wouldn't have if they had to jump through some hoops in order to get there. Apathy in our voting system, across democracy, across this country, is incredibly dangerous, and it's something that we are seeing rising. Our democratic system should be inclusive and easy to engage with. This makes it less easy to engage with and less inclusive. That's the real problem here. The cost to the country of what is a tiny, tiny number of incidents of electoral fraud balanced against the cost of this scheme simply doesn't make sense. It's completely disproportionate. And it's a scheme that's just not fit for purpose. There are a lot of other types of fraud that cost the taxpayers of this country a lot more money that this investment could be directed to instead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I've got Councillor Rylands and then Councillor Bailey to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not going to rehash the arguments that Councillor Bailey made, which I thoroughly agree with. Voter disenfranchisement is a far, far greater problem in this country. And in fact, in living memory on this council, we have had a perfectly valid election with a 13% turnout. There were unusual circumstances, but that was a perfectly valid turnout. Up to you to decide whether you think democracy is better served by a 13% turnout or by forcing people to have a piece of paper. Now, I was actually at a very poorly attended scrutiny meeting a few weeks ago, at which our returning officer very despondently mentioned that to date he had had no information whatsoever about the implementation of the voter ID scheme, and in theory the first elections at which it will be a thing will be these coming May elections. Now, it was November, that was the end of November, that leaves less than 6 months to go. He mentioned that he thought there were probably 20,000 people within the district area who had neither a driving licence nor a passport, and that therefore he would have to make arrangements for probably up to 20,000 people. He also said that the arrangements that he thought would be used would be the ones very similar to the ones that are used for postal votes, which essentially involves the person presenting themselves. He expressed a concern that his staff at polling stations would be exposed to the anger of people who turned up without any voter ID, and who would then either kick off or go away and not come back again. And so to counteract this, the only solution he could see was to register as many people as possible by postal vote between now and then. That's not an acceptable way to bring in any scheme. If 6 months out from a set of quite major elections we have no information whatsoever, I suggest that this plan is at best half-baked still, even though it is in law. And I fully support this motion, and I wish I had actually supported it. I didn't see it come in, I'm afraid. But yes, so I would urge you to vote for this motion. And please know that the effect on our returning officer and our democratic process very locally is really great. It's not organised yet. It can't be organised because no information has come down. So please support this motion for on those grounds, because it's a pointless thing to have. It does nothing to counteract disenfranchisement, which is a far greater problem, and it's causing untold headaches to district councils and polling authorities up and down the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Councillor Bailey, could you reasonably briefly sum up if you wish, or are you happy to let it lie? Well, that probably got you at least a couple of votes there. So anyway, so could I please, all those in favour of the motion as presented? Ooh, sorry. Any against? That's clearly carried. That brings our last full council meeting before Christmas, our last full council meeting of 2022 to an end. The Talbot Arms in Upline for anybody who wants a pint. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, either in person. I'll tell you what. That's a first. God, Merry Christmas to you lot as well.